They sold her to erase a debt she never owed. 19-year-old Claire Whitmore stood trembling in a mansion that reeked of expensive cologne and old blood, about to become the unwilling bride of the city's most feared mafia boss. Everyone warned her that Damian Cross was a monster who destroyed everything he touched. But when he finally looked at her with those cold, calculating eyes, he didn't see a transaction. He saw something he'd been waiting for. And his first words weren't a threat. They were a promise that would change everything. No one will ever hurt you again. If you're hooked, stay until the end to see how this dangerous love story unfolds. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Claire's story travels. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and lies. Claire Whitmore sat perfectly still in the uncomfortable chair, her hands folded in her lap to hide the trembling. She'd learned early that stillness could sometimes make you invisible, could sometimes make the bad things pass over you like you weren't even there. It hadn't worked when her parents died in the car crash 3 months ago. It hadn't worked when her Uncle Richard moved into their family home like a conquering army. And it definitely wasn't working now, as he signed away her entire future with the casual flourish of a man disposing of garbage. All very straightforward, the lawyer was saying, his voice professionally neutral as he shuffled papers across the mahogany desk. The young lady signs here, here, and here. The debt is transferred and considered paid in full upon completion of the marriage contract. Marriage contract. The words sat in Claire's stomach like stones. She was 19 years old. 3 months ago, she'd been planning to start culinary school in the fall, saving money from her job at the neighborhood bakery, dreaming about opening her own cafe someday. 3 months ago, her biggest worry had been whether to specialize in French pastries or Italian desserts. 3 months ago, her parents had been alive. Now she sat in a lawyer's office while her uncle, her father's own brother, sold her like livestock to pay off gambling debts she'd only learned about yesterday. Claire, Richard's voice had that false patience that barely concealed his irritation. Sign the papers. She looked at him for the first time since they'd entered the office. Richard Whitmore had her father's eyes, but none of his warmth. Where her dad had laugh lines, Richard had the deep grooves of perpetual dissatisfaction. Where her dad had built a successful bakery through hard work and community connection, Richard had apparently built an impressive mountain of debt through poker games and bad investments. What happens if I don't? Claire's voice came out quieter than she'd intended, but at least it didn't shake. Richard's expression darkened. Then the people I owe money to will take it out of my hide. Is that what you want? Your own uncle beaten to death because you're too selfish to help family? Family. The word should have meant something, should have carried weight and warmth and safety. Instead, it was just another weapon he was using against her. You lost the bakery, she said, still speaking softly but feeling something hardening in her chest. Mom and Dad's bakery, the house, everything they built. All of it, gone, because you gambled with money that wasn't yours. I was trying to make investments. You were trying to get rich quick, Claire interrupted, and was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. And now you're selling me to fix your mistakes. Richard leaned forward, his face flushing. You ungrateful little. You have no idea what I've sacrificed. Taking you in after the accident, feeding you, keeping a roof over your head. The roof that was already mine, Claire said. The house my parents left to me. Which you can't inherit until you're 21, Richard shot back. Until then, I'm your legal guardian, and you'll do what I say. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take a moment. No! Richard slapped his palm on the desk. No more moments. She signs now, or I'm done protecting her from the consequences. Claire looked down at the papers in front of her. The language was dense, full of legal terminology she barely understood, but certain phrases stood out with horrible clarity. In exchange for full settlement of debts owed, marriage contract binding for a period of no less than 1 year, transfer of guardianship to Damian Cross. Damian Cross. Even his name sounded dangerous. She'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone in the city had. The man who controlled half the underground business from the docks to downtown. The one the police couldn't touch and the politicians didn't dare cross. People spoke his name in whispers, like saying it too loud might summon something terrible. And Richard was selling her to him like she was a piece of furniture being used to settle a debt. What Claire swallowed hard. What will he do to me? The lawyer and Richard exchanged a look that made her stomach drop. That's not really our concern, the lawyer said carefully. She'll be fine, Richard said, in the tone of someone who didn't care either way. Cross is a businessman. This is just a transaction. You do what you're told, keep your head down, and everyone gets what they need. Everyone except her. Claire picked up the pen with fingers that had gone numb. She thought about her mother's smile, the way the whole kitchen would smell like vanilla and cinnamon when she was baking. She thought about her father's laugh, how he could make even the grumpiest customer smile. She thought about the home they'd built, the life they'd given her, the future they'd wanted for her. All of it was already gone. All except her. And now Richard was taking that too. The pen hovered over the first signature line. Claire's hand was shaking now, no matter how hard she tried to control it. She could walk away. She could refuse, run, try to disappear into the city and start over with nothing. But Richard's debts wouldn't disappear. And the kind of people who loaned money to men like her uncle weren't known for their patience or mercy. If she ran, they'd come after Richard. And despite everything, despite his cruelty and his selfishness and his complete failure as family, she couldn't quite bring herself to sign his death warrant, even if it meant signing her own instead. Claire pressed the pen to paper and wrote her name. Then again, and again. Each signature felt like giving away another piece of herself. By the time she signed the last line, she felt hollowed out, empty except for a dull ache where hope used to be. Excellent. The lawyer gathered the papers with obvious relief. The ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock. Mr. Cross has arranged for a car to collect Miss Whitmore at 7:30. Tomorrow. The word hit her like a slap. I'll have her ready, Richard said, standing and buttoning his jacket like they'd just concluded a successful business meeting. Claire stood too, her legs unsteady beneath her. She felt like she was watching herself from a distance, like this was happening to someone else, and she was just an observer. Do I get to pack? She asked. Bring my things? Bring whatever you can fit in one suitcase, Richard said dismissively. You won't need much where you're going. Where she was going, to Damien Cross's house, to become Damien Cross's wife, to disappear into a life she couldn't even begin to imagine. The ride back to what used to be her home passed in a blur. Richard drove in silence, probably already mentally spending whatever money he'd gotten for selling her. Claire stared out the window at familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, like she was already a ghost haunting her own life. The house looked the same as always, the white colonial with blue shutters that her parents had restored themselves, the garden her mother had carefully tended, the walkway where Claire had learned to ride a bike. But it wasn't hers anymore. According to the papers Richard had shoved in her face last week, he'd already sold it to pay some of his other debts. The new owners were moving in next month. Everything she'd ever known was being systematically erased. Inside, Richard headed straight for his study, her father's study, without another word. Claire climbed the stairs to her bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her room was exactly as she'd left it that morning. The bed was unmade from her restless sleep. Her laptop sat open on the desk, still displaying the culinary school application she'd never get to submit. Photos covered the walls, her parents, her friends from school, memories of a life that was already becoming distant. She had one night to pack up 19 years of existence into a single suitcase. Claire pulled her largest bag from the closet and started making impossible choices. Clothes, obviously, but which ones? Practical outfits or the pretty dresses her mother had bought her? Photos of her parents or the jewelry her grandmother had left her? Books she loved or the laptop she'd need if she ever hoped to have any kind of future? In the end, she packed practically. Jeans, sweaters, a few simple dresses, underwear and pajamas. Her mother's silver locket and her grandmother's pearl earrings. The laptop and charger. A small photo album her mom had made for her 18th birthday. The suitcase closed with a sound like finality. Claire sat on her bed and looked around the room one last time. Tomorrow night, she'd be sleeping somewhere else. In Damien Cross's house, maybe in his bed. The thought made her skin crawl. She'd never even kissed anyone. Had never wanted to rush into that part of life when she was so focused on school and her future career. And now she was being handed over to a man old enough to be, well, she didn't actually know how old he was. The stories never mentioned his age, just his reputation. Dangerous, ruthless, untouchable. And tomorrow, she would be his wife. Claire didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as cars passed outside, thinking about all the ways her life could end tomorrow. Would he hurt her immediately, or would he wait? Would it be quick, or would he make it last? Would anyone even care when she disappeared? She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to pale morning light and the sound of Richard shouting on the phone downstairs. The day passed in a strange fog. Claire moved through the house like a ghost, touching familiar objects one last time. The kitchen where she'd learned to bake with her mother. The living room where her family used to watch movies on Friday nights. The back porch where her father taught her about business and community and treating people with respect. All of it was becoming memory. At 6 o'clock, Richard knocked on her door. "Get ready. Car's coming in an hour and a half." Claire wanted to say something cutting, something that would make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused. But when she opened her mouth, no words came out. What was the point? He didn't care. He'd never cared. She showered mechanically, dried her hair, put on one of the simple dresses she'd packed, a dark blue one that her mother always said brought out her eyes. She didn't bother with makeup beyond a little concealer to hide the shadows under her eyes from sleepless nights. Damien Cross wasn't getting a bride trying to impress him. He was getting exactly what he'd paid for, a transaction. At 7:20, a black car pulled up in front of the house. Claire watched from her bedroom window as a driver in a dark suit stepped out and opened the rear door, waiting. Professional, silent, efficient. Like he did this every day. Maybe he did. She grabbed her suitcase and her purse and headed downstairs. Richard was waiting by the front door, his expression unreadable. "Remember," he said as she reached the bottom step, "keep your head down. Do what you're told. Don't make trouble." Claire looked at him, really looked at him, for what she knew would be the last time. "When this is over," she said quietly, "when I'm whatever I'm going to be after tonight, I never want to see you again. Not at holidays, not at funerals, not ever. You stopped being family the moment you signed those papers." Richard's face flushed. "You ungrateful—" "Goodbye, Uncle Richard." Claire walked past him and out the door without looking back. The driver took her suitcase without a word and held the car door open. The interior was expensive leather and tinted windows. There was a privacy screen between the front and back seats. She was alone. The car pulled away smoothly, and Claire watched her childhood home disappear behind them. Richard stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, already looking relieved to have her gone. The drive took 40 minutes. They left her neighborhood, passed through downtown with its glittering office buildings and expensive restaurants, then headed into an area of the city Claire had never visited. The buildings here were older, more industrial, warehouses and shipping facilities, the kind of place where bad things happened in the shadows. But then the landscape changed again. They turned onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees, their branches forming a tunnel of leaves overhead. The road climbed gradually, and suddenly they were in another world entirely. An iron gate swung open as they approached. Beyond it, Claire could see manicured lawns, gardens with stone pathways, fountains lit from below. And at the center of it all, like something out of a Gothic novel, stood a mansion that looked more like a fortress. 3 stories of dark stone and tall windows, towers at the corners, heavy wooden doors that would take 3 men to open. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, elegant and menacing. It looked exactly like the kind of place a crime lord would live. The car pulled up to the main entrance. The driver opened her door. Claire stepped out on shaking legs. The evening air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear water trickling from a fountain. It was peaceful, almost serene. She didn't trust it for a second. The mansion's front doors opened and a woman appeared. She was middle-aged, with silver-streaked hair pulled into an elegant bun, wearing a black dress that suggested staff rather than family. Her expression was professionally neutral, but her eyes were kind. "Miss Whitmore?" she said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent Claire couldn't quite place. "Welcome. I'm Elena. I manage the household. Please, come inside." The driver had already disappeared with her suitcase. Claire had no choice but to follow Elena into the mansion. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings with crown molding, marble floors that gleamed like glass, a grand staircase that swept up to the second floor. Everything spoke of wealth and power and permanence. "I'll show you to your room," Elena said, leading her toward the staircase. The ceremony will begin in 30 minutes. I've laid out your dress. My dress? Claire followed her up the stairs, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. Mr. Cross arranged for it to be made, Elena said. I took the liberty of selecting accessories as well. I hope they're to your taste. They reached the second floor and walked down a hallway lined with closed doors and expensive artwork. Elena stopped at a door near the end and pushed it open. The bedroom beyond was larger than Claire's entire bedroom back home. A four-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in white linens that looked like clouds. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking the gardens, and spread across the bed was a wedding dress. Not white, ivory, with delicate lace and beading that caught the light. Simple but elegant. Exactly the kind of dress Claire would have chosen for herself if this were a real wedding instead of a transaction. I'll give you privacy to change, Elena said. I'll return in 20 minutes to help with your hair if you'd like. Then she was gone, closing the door softly behind her. Claire approached the dress slowly, as if it might bite. The fabric was silk, cool and smooth under her fingers. There were shoes too, ivory heels that would give her a few extra inches of height, and jewelry, pearl earrings and a delicate bracelet. She felt like a doll being dressed for display. But what choice did she have? She was here. The papers were signed. There was no going back. Claire changed mechanically, trading her simple blue dress for the wedding gown. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her specifically, which it probably had been. How long had Damien Cross been planning this? How much had he paid her uncle? And why her? Why not one of the countless other women who would probably throw themselves at a man with his wealth and power? She was staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror when Elena knocked and entered. "Oh," the older woman said softly. "You look beautiful." Claire didn't feel beautiful. She felt like a lamb dressed for slaughter. Elena worked quickly and efficiently, pinning Claire's hair into an elegant updo that left a few loose curls framing her face. She applied subtle makeup, just enough to hide the exhaustion and fear, not enough to look artificial. "There," Elena said, stepping back. "Perfect." "Elena," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's he like?" "Mr. Cross?" The older woman's expression became carefully neutral. "He's a fair employer." "That's not what I asked." Elena studied her for a long moment, then sighed softly. "He's a complicated man. Dangerous, yes, but not without honor in his way. He keeps his word, and he protects what's his." What's his? Like property, like a possession. Does he? Claire couldn't quite finish the question. "He hasn't had women here," Elena said, understanding. "If that's what you're worried about. He's very private. I've worked here for 5 years and I've never seen him with anyone." That should have been reassuring. Somehow it wasn't. A knock sounded at the door. "It's time," a male voice called from outside. Elena squeezed Claire's hand briefly. "Breathe. You're stronger than you think." Then she opened the door, and Claire's last few minutes of freedom ended. 2 men in dark suits waited in the hallway. Not threatening exactly, but clearly security. They fell into step on either side of her as she walked, boxing her in without touching her. They descended the grand staircase and turned down a different hallway. At the end, double doors stood open, revealing what looked like a private chapel. It was small, but elegant. Dark wood pews, stained glass windows, even though it was evening and they couldn't be properly appreciated, candles flickering in wall sconces. And at the altar, waiting with his back to her, stood a man. Claire's steps faltered. He was tall, she could tell even from behind, broad-shouldered in a perfectly tailored black suit. Dark hair, slightly too long to be conventionally proper. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, radiating an authority that needed no announcement. This was Damien Cross. The guards escorted her down the aisle. There was no music, no flowers, no guests except Elena, who had slipped into a pew near the back, and the 2 guards who stationed themselves by the door. This wasn't a wedding. It was a business transaction being given a legal veneer. As Claire approached the altar, Damien turned to look at her. She'd expected a monster, scars maybe, cold eyes, the hard face of a man who'd killed without hesitation. What she saw instead stole her breath. He was younger than she'd imagined, maybe early 30s, and handsome in a way that was almost unfair, with strong features and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. There was a hardness to him, yes, evidence of a life that hadn't been soft or easy. But there was also an intensity in the way he looked at her that made her feel like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. It should have been terrifying. It was terrifying. But it was also something else she couldn't quite name. A priest appeared from a side door, old with nervous hands and a voice that shook slightly as he began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, the words washed over Claire like noise. She was too focused on the man standing beside her, who hadn't taken his eyes off her since she'd walked down the aisle. He didn't look at her like property. He looked at her like she was a puzzle he'd been trying to solve for a very long time. Do you, Damien Alexander Cross, take this woman? I do. His voice was deep and sure, without hesitation. The priest turned to her. Do you, Claire Elizabeth Whitmore, take this man? Claire's mouth was dry. She could say no. She could turn and run, even though she'd never make it past the guards at the door. But what would be the point? The papers were signed. The debt was paid. There was nowhere for her to go. I do, she whispered. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The world seemed to stop. Damien stepped closer, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But there was nowhere to go, and they both knew it. His hand came up to cup her cheek, surprisingly gentle. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It was brief, chaste even, but there was a possession in it that made Claire's heart race. When he pulled back, his thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Hello, Claire, he said softly, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like tenderness. Then he took her hand and led her out of the chapel, and she realized with numb certainty that her old life had just ended completely. Whatever happened next, she would face it as Damien Cross's wife. And heaven help her, she had no idea what that meant. The reception, if it could be called that, was held in a dining room that looked like it belonged in a European palace. But it was just the two of them, seated at opposite ends of a table long enough to seat 20. With Elena overseeing staff who brought course after course of food Claire couldn't bring herself to taste. Damien ate calmly, occasionally glancing at her untouched plates. You should eat, he finally said. His voice carried easily down the length of the table. I'm not hungry. You're terrified. The bluntness of it startled her into meeting his gaze. He was watching her with that same intense focus, as if she were a book he was determined to read. Wouldn't you be? Claire asked. Probably. He set down his fork. Let's dispense with the formalities, shall we? You have questions. Ask them. Claire's hands twisted in her lap beneath the table. There were so many questions she didn't know where to start. Why me? She finally asked. My uncle has gambling debts all over the city. You could have collected 100 different ways. Why this? Because I wanted you. The simplicity of it sent a chill down her spine. You don't know me. Don't I? Damien leaned back in his chair, and for the first time she saw the hint of a smile. It wasn't warm. You graduated high school with honors despite having to work 20 hours a week at your parents' bakery. You were accepted to the Culinary Institute with a partial scholarship. Your favorite dessert is lavender panna cotta, but you refuse to make it commercially because you think it's too sophisticated for the neighborhood customers. You read mystery novels when you can't sleep, and you alphabetize the spice cabinet when you're anxious. Claire felt the blood drain from her face. How do you know that? I've known you for a very long time, Claire. His voice was quiet now, almost gentle. You just didn't know I existed. She couldn't finish. It was too disturbing, too invasive. I know how it sounds, Damien said, but I'm not going to lie to you, not now, not ever. You want the truth? Here it is. I saw you 3 years ago. You were helping your mother with a catering order for a charity event. You had flour in your hair, and you were laughing at something she said, and you looked so alive, so genuine. In my world, genuine is rarer than diamonds, and I wanted it. I wanted you. So you've been, what? Stalking me? Protecting you, he corrected. Do you remember the man who tried to follow you home from work last year? The one who disappeared after the first time? Claire remembered. She'd been closing up the bakery alone, and a man had been waiting across the street. She'd felt his eyes on her the whole walk to the bus stop. The next night, he'd been there again. The third night, he was gone, and she'd never seen him after that. That was you? My people. You were never in danger, Claire, not while I was watching. That's not protection, she said, her voice rising. That's control. You've been controlling my life without my knowledge or consent. Yes. No apology in his voice. And now I'm controlling it with a marriage license. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not a good man. But I'll tell you what I am. I'm a man who keeps his word. And I gave you a promise tonight, Claire. No one will hurt you again. Not your uncle. Not my enemies. Not anyone. Including me. Unless you count taking away my freedom as hurt. I count it as necessary. Damien stood, and the guards by the door immediately straightened. You're exhausted. Elena will show you to your room. Your actual room, not where you changed earlier. You'll have privacy. A lock on the door if you want it. And what if I use it? Then you use it. He walked toward her, and Claire fought the urge to push back from the table. I'm not going to force myself on you, Claire. That's not why you're here. Then why am I here? He stopped beside her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. When he spoke, his voice was low enough that only she could hear. Because in my world, everything I care about becomes a target. And I care about you. Have for a very long time. This marriage protects you legally, financially, and physically. It puts you under my protection in a way that no one would dare challenge. And yes, it also means you're mine. But being mine, Claire, means you're untouchable. It means you're safe. It means when you sleep tonight, you can actually sleep because no one is coming to hurt you. He straightened, his expression returning to that cool neutrality. Elena will answer any questions you have about the house and your accommodations. Sleep well, Mrs. Cross. Then he was gone, disappearing through a side door with two of the guards following. Mrs. Cross. The name felt foreign in her mind. Elena appeared at her elbow. Come, let me show you to your suite. Claire followed numbly as Elena led her back upstairs, past the room where she'd changed earlier, to a door at the far end of the hallway. The suite beyond was breathtaking, a bedroom with that same four-poster bed, now turned down with fresh linens, a sitting area with a fireplace and comfortable chairs, a bathroom with a tub the size of a small pool, a walk-in closet that was already filled with clothes, all in her size, all in styles she would have chosen for herself. How long has this been ready? Claire asked. A few months, Elena admitted. Mr. Cross is very thorough in his preparations. This is insane. Perhaps. Elena moved to the nightstand where a phone sat charging. This is a direct line to my room, the kitchen, and security. If you need anything at all, just pick it up. There are guards outside, but they're here for your protection, not to keep you prisoner. You're free to move about the house and grounds as you wish. But not to leave. Elena's expression turned sympathetic. Would you really want to, with your uncle's other creditors still circling? The truth of it settled over Claire like a weight. Even if she could leave, where would she go? Richard had sold her home. She had no other family, no resources. And apparently there were other people out there who thought they were owed something from Richard's debts. At least here, according to Damien's promise, she was safe. Even if the safety came with a price, she was still too afraid to calculate. Get some rest, Elena said gently. Things will look different in the morning. They always do. After Elena left, Claire changed into pajamas and stood on the balcony, looking out over the gardens. The night was quiet except for the sound of the fountains and distant traffic from the city beyond the estate walls. She was married, to a man she didn't know, a man who'd been watching her for 3 years, a man who spoke of protection and possession in the same breath. Claire touched the wedding ring on her finger, simple platinum, elegant and understated. It felt heavy. She should be planning her escape, should be looking for weaknesses in the security, counting guards, mapping exits. Instead, she found herself thinking about the way Damien had looked at her in the chapel, like she was precious, like she was something he'd been searching for and finally found. It should have terrified her. Maybe it did. But somewhere underneath the terror was something else, a tiny, treacherous part of her that whispered, "When was the last time someone looked at you like you mattered?" Claire shook her head and went back inside, locking the balcony doors, and then, after a moment's hesitation, locking her bedroom door too. Damien had said she could. She needed to see if he'd keep his word. She climbed into bed, expecting to lie awake all night like she had the night before. But exhaustion finally caught up with her, and she drifted into an uneasy sleep. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and there was a breakfast tray sitting on the table by the fireplace. The door was still locked. He'd kept his word. It was such a small thing, but somehow, in that moment, it felt like everything. Claire spent the first 3 days in her locked room like a prisoner who'd built her own cage. Elena brought meals on elegant trays that Claire barely touched. The older woman never commented on the locked door or the untouched food, just quietly replaced breakfast with lunch, lunch with dinner, day after day. The only words exchanged were Claire's polite thanks and Elena's gentle reminders that she was welcome anywhere in the house. But Claire couldn't bring herself to leave the safety of her suite. Out there, beyond her door, was the rest of Damien Cross's world, a world she didn't understand and wasn't sure she wanted to. And here, at least, she could pretend she had some measure of control. On the fourth morning, she woke to find her breakfast tray accompanied by something new, a laptop, sleek and expensive, with a note in bold masculine handwriting. The password is your mother's maiden name. The internet is unrestricted. I meant what I said about not making you a prisoner. Claire stared at the note for a long time before opening the laptop. The screen came to life immediately, and she typed in her mother's maiden name with shaking fingers. It worked. She spent the next 2 hours testing the boundaries of her digital freedom. Her email accounts were still active. Social media still accessible. She could reach the outside world if she wanted to, could call for help. But who would she call? Her friends from high school had scattered to different colleges. Her coworkers from the bakery were good people, but not close enough to risk getting involved with a man like Damien Cross. And her uncle, the person who should have protected her, was the one who'd sold her in the first place. Claire closed the laptop and returned to staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her isolation settle over her like a blanket. She might not be locked in a dungeon, but she was still utterly alone. On the 5th day, Claire finally left her room. Not because she'd suddenly found courage, but because the walls were starting to close in, and she needed to remember what the sky looked like. She showered, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater from the mysteriously well-stocked closet, and unlocked her door with hands that trembled only slightly. The hallway was empty. Quiet. She'd half expected guards to be stationed outside her door, but there was no one. Just expensive carpet and elegant lighting and the distant sound of someone moving around downstairs. Claire made her way to the grand staircase and descended slowly, one hand trailing along the banister. The mansion felt different in daylight, less ominous, more like an actual home. She could see details she'd missed in her terrified haze on the wedding night. Family portraits on the walls, fresh flowers on the hall tables, morning light streaming through tall windows. She found Elena in what appeared to be a morning room, reviewing papers at a small desk. "Good morning," the older woman said, looking up with a smile that didn't quite hide her relief. "I was beginning to think you'd decided to become a permanent resident of the second floor." "I needed some time," Claire said quietly. "Of course you did." Elena set aside her papers. "Would you like a proper breakfast? Something other than what I've been leaving outside your door?" Claire's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, reminding her that she'd been barely eating for days. "That would be nice." Elena led her to a smaller dining room, nothing like the formal space where she'd eaten her wedding dinner. This one was bright and comfortable, with windows overlooking the gardens and a table that could seat maybe 8 people instead of 20. "Mr. Cross takes his breakfast here when he's home," Elena explained, pulling out a chair for Claire. "I'll have Cook prepare something for you. Any preferences?" "Whatever's easiest," Claire said, then hesitated. Is Mr. Cross here now?" "He left early this morning for business in the city. He won't be back until late evening." Elena's expression softened. "You have the run of the house and grounds, Claire. No one's going to bother you or ask questions. Think of today as a chance to get your bearings." After Elena left, Claire sat alone in the sunny room and tried to process the strange reality of her situation. She was married to one of the most dangerous men in the city. She lived in a mansion that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. She had staff who treated her with respectful deference despite the fact that she was essentially a purchased bride. And her husband, the man who'd bought her to settle a debt, had given her a laptop with unrestricted internet access and told her she wasn't a prisoner. None of it made sense. Cook appeared with a breakfast that could have fed 4 people. Fluffy scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like heaven, and coffee that actually brought tears to Claire's eyes because it was exactly how she liked it. Lots of cream, 1 sugar. "How did you know?" she asked, looking up at the middle-aged woman in the doorway. Cook smiled. "Mr. Cross is very particular about details. He provided quite extensive notes about your preferences." Of course he did, because he'd been watching her for 3 years, studying her, learning her habits and tastes like she was a subject he needed to master. It should have been creepy. It was creepy, but it was also oddly thoughtful, in a deeply unsettling way. Claire ate slowly, savoring real food for the first time in days. The eggs were perfect, the fruit was fresh and sweet, and the pastries, she bit into a croissant and nearly moaned at the buttery, flaky perfection. "These are incredible," she said, when Cook returned to clear the dishes. "I'm glad you approve. Mr. Cross mentioned you had professional training in baking. I was supposed to start culinary school this fall." The words came out before Claire could stop them, and she immediately felt stupid for sharing something so personal. But Cook just nodded sympathetically. "That's a shame. Though the kitchen here is quite well equipped if you ever want to practice. I certainly wouldn't mind the help, or the company." It was such a normal, kind offer that Claire felt something crack in her chest. "Thank you. Maybe I will." After breakfast, she explored. Elena had said she had the run of the house, and Claire decided to test that claim. The mansion was enormous. She found a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that could have belonged to a university, a music room with a grand piano that looked like it was actually played, not just decorative, a gym that would have made a professional athlete jealous, a conservatory filled with exotic plants, and comfortable reading chairs. Every room was beautiful, expensive, and utterly impersonal, like a luxury hotel rather than a home. Except for one room on the first floor that she almost walked past before something made her stop and push open the door. It was an office, clearly Damien's personal space, dark wood furniture, leather chairs, and a massive desk covered with papers and file folders. The walls were lined with bookshelves, but these weren't decorative. They were packed with well-worn books on business, law, and history. And on the credenza behind the desk, in simple silver frames, were photographs. Claire stepped closer without meaning to, drawn by curiosity she couldn't quite name. The photos weren't what she expected. No pictures of Damien with criminal associates or weapons or any of the things she'd imagined. Instead, there were family photos. A much younger Damien with an older couple who had to be his parents, all 3 of them smiling at the camera. Another of teenage Damien in a school uniform, looking uncomfortable and defiant. A beach scene with a woman who shared Damien's dark eyes, probably a sister. And then in the back, almost hidden behind the others, was a photo that made Claire's breath catch. It was her. She was standing in front of the bakery, wearing her work apron, laughing at something off camera. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there was flour on her cheek. She looked happy, carefree. She looked like she had before her world fell apart. "I took that 2 years ago." Claire spun around, heart hammering, to find Damien standing in the doorway. He was dressed more casually than she'd seen him before. Dark jeans, a black Henley, no jacket. He looked younger like this, less like a crime lord and more like a dangerously handsome man who happened to have terrifying amounts of power. "You're supposed to be in the city," she said, her voice coming out breathless. "Meeting ended early." He moved into the room, but kept his distance, as if he could sense how close she was to bolting. "I didn't mean to startle you. You have a picture of me. I have several, actually." No apology in his voice. "I told you I've been watching you for a long time." Claire looked back at the photo, trying to remember that day. It must have been summer, based on her outfit. Had she felt eyes on her? Had she somehow known she was being observed and studied like a specimen? "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes," Damien agreed, "but I've never claimed to be sane where you're concerned." She turned to face him fully. He was leaning against the door frame, arms crossed, watching her with that same intense focus that made her feel like the only thing in the world that mattered. "Why?" Claire asked. "You still haven't really explained why. You're rich, powerful, probably have women throwing themselves at you. Why go to all this trouble for someone like me? Someone like you? Damien repeated, and something dangerous flickered in his expression. You mean someone genuine? Someone who works hard and treats people with kindness even when the world hasn't been kind back? Someone who can make a stranger's day better with a smile and a fresh pastry? He pushed off the doorframe and took a step closer. In my world, Claire, everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle, a scheme, a price. Everyone is pretending to be something they're not. But you, another step. You are real. When you smile, you mean it. When you help someone, it's because you actually care, not because you're calculating what you'll get in return. Do you have any idea how rare that is? So you decided to own it? The words came out sharper than she intended. To own me? To protect it, Damien corrected quietly. To keep the world from destroying it, from destroying you. They stood there in tense silence, the weight of his obsession hanging in the air between them. I went to see your uncle yesterday, Damien said finally, changing the subject with jarring abruptness. Claire's stomach dropped. Why? Because he had some thoughts about renegotiating our arrangement. Apparently he's decided that since you're now married to a wealthy man, he should be entitled to additional compensation. He what? Don't worry, I corrected his misunderstanding. Damien's voice went cold in a way that sent shivers down Claire's spine. He won't be bothering you again. What did you do to him? Nothing permanent, just made it clear that our transaction was complete and final, and that if he or anyone in his household attempts to contact you or makes any claims on your parents' estate, the consequences will be severe. Claire should have felt relieved, should have been grateful that someone was standing between her and Richard's greed. Instead, she felt a complicated twist of emotions she couldn't quite name. The estate is gone. He sold everything. Actually, no. Damien moved to his desk and pulled out a folder. He sold the house and took a loan against the bakery, but the sale hasn't closed yet. I bought both properties. The house is currently being renovated. I thought you might want to move back in eventually, or sell it yourself and keep the money. The bakery is also being restored. It needs work, but it's structurally sound. Claire stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. You bought my parents' house? And the bakery? I told you I protect what's mine. That includes your history, your memories, your heritage. Your uncle tried to erase all of it to cover his debts. I'm giving it back to you. Why would you do that? Damien looked at her like the question made no sense. Because it matters to you. That makes it matter to me. The simplicity of it was devastating. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry, would not give him the satisfaction of seeing how thoroughly he'd gotten under her skin. I don't understand you, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I know. Damien's expression softened into something that might have been regret. But you will, eventually. He held out the folder. The deeds are in your name, the properties are yours, legally and completely. Do whatever you want with them. Claire took the folder with numb fingers. Inside were official-looking documents with her name, her married name, Claire Cross, printed in bold letters. I should get back to work, Damien said, but I wanted to tell you in person and to see how you were settling in. I'm a prisoner with nice furniture and unrestricted Wi-Fi, Claire said flatly. You're a woman who's had her whole life turned upside down and is handling it with remarkable strength. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I know this isn't what you wanted. I know I'm not what you wanted, but I meant what I said on our wedding night. You're safe here, and whether you believe it or not, you're free to be yourself. To have opinions, to tell me to go to hell if that's what you're feeling, to make this space your own. And if I want to leave? Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then we'll have a conversation about the safest way to do that. But I won't lie to you, Claire. Right now, leaving would make you a target. Your uncle's other creditors have already been asking questions. My enemies would see you as a vulnerability they could exploit. Inside these walls, you're untouchable. Outside them, you'd be in danger. So I'm trapped. You're protected. There's a difference. After he left, Claire sank into one of the leather chairs and opened the folder with shaking hands. The documents were real, legal, binding. The house where she'd grown up, the bakery her parents had built, they were hers again. Damien Cross had given her back her heritage like it was nothing, like erasing her uncle's betrayal was just another business transaction. She didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange rhythm that Claire was afraid to call normal but couldn't deny had a certain pattern to it. Mornings, she had the house mostly to herself. Damien left early for whatever business a crime lord conducted during daylight hours. Claire explored the estate, gradually mapping out the grounds and discovering hidden corners. A rose garden with benches perfect for reading, a greenhouse where an elderly gardener grew herbs and vegetables, a small pond with koi fish that didn't seem to mind when she sat nearby and talked to them about nothing. She also started spending time in the kitchen with Cook, whose actual name was Margaret. The woman was patient and kind, and she didn't ask questions when Claire showed up asking if she could practice her baking skills. "Mr. Cross mentioned you might want access to the kitchen," Margaret said, gesturing to the professional-grade equipment. "Everything's yours to use. I'd be delighted to have someone who actually knows what they're doing." So Claire baked. She made the lavender panna cotta that Damien somehow knew she loved. She perfected her croissant technique until Margaret declared them restaurant quality. She experimented with new recipes and old favorites, losing herself in the familiar alchemy of flour and sugar and heat. It was the closest she'd felt to normal since her parents died. Evenings were different. Damien came home around 7, and they had dinner together in the small dining room. Always just the two of them, with Elena supervising the service and then discreetly disappearing. The first few dinners were silent, awkward affairs where Claire pushed food around her plate, and Damien worked through papers while eating. But gradually, conversation began to emerge. "How was your day?" Damien asked one evening, and it was such a normal question that Claire almost laughed. "I made croissants," she said. "Margaret said they were perfect." "I know. I had one for breakfast. You're talented." "You ate one of my croissants?" "I eat everything you bake. Margaret saves me samples." He said it like it was obvious, like of course he'd want to taste everything she made. "That's..." Claire didn't know how to finish. Weird, sweet, possessive, all of the above? "I like knowing what you're doing," Damien said simply. "What makes you happy? What you create." And somehow, over dinners and quiet conversations, Claire started to see glimpses of the man behind the reputation. Damien was intelligent, frighteningly so. He read voraciously, everything from history to philosophy to contemporary fiction. He had opinions on art, music, literature. He played piano, though he claimed to be out of practice. He was also intensely private about his actual business dealings, deflecting whenever Claire tried to ask about what he did all day. "Nothing you need to worry about," was his standard response. "I'm married to you. Doesn't that make it my business?" "It makes it my responsibility to keep that part of my life away from you," which was both protective and frustrating in equal measure. 3 weeks after the wedding, Claire woke to the sound of construction. She pulled on a robe and followed the noise downstairs to find the front entrance full of workers carrying in furniture and boxes. "What's happening?" she asked Elena, who was directing traffic with calm efficiency. "Delivery day," Elena said. "Mr. Cross arranged for some items to be brought over." "What items?" Elena just smiled. "You should ask him yourself. He's in the morning room." Claire found Damien reviewing paperwork over coffee, looking annoyingly alert for 7 in the morning. "What's being delivered to my house?" she demanded. He looked up, and there was something almost playful in his expression. "Your things." "My things are in my bedroom." "Your things from your parents' house. I had a team carefully pack and catalog everything before the renovation started. I thought you might want them." Claire's breath caught. "Everything?" "Every photograph, book, kitchen item, piece of furniture, and personal belonging. It's all been stored carefully. You can decide what you want to keep here, what you want returned to the house when it's finished, and what you'd prefer to donate or sell." She should have been angry that he'd gone through her family home without asking, should have felt violated that strangers had touched her parents' belongings. Instead, she felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Hey!" Damien was up and moving toward her before she could process it. "Claire, what's wrong?" "I thought it was all gone," she managed. "Richard said he was selling everything. I thought I'd lost all of it. Mom's cookbooks, Dad's tools, the photo albums. Nothing's gone." His voice was gentle in a way that undid her completely. "I made sure of it. Everything your parents owned, everything that mattered to them and to you. It's all safe." Claire pressed her hands to her face, trying to hold back the sobs that wanted to break free. She'd been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day in this strange new life, that she hadn't let herself grieve what she'd lost. But Damien had saved it, had preserved it, had given her back pieces of her parents when she'd thought they were gone forever. She felt his hand on her shoulder, tentative and careful. "I'm sorry. I thought it would make you happy. I didn't mean to upset you." "I'm not upset." Claire lowered her hands and looked at him through tears. I don't know what I am, but it's not upset." Damien pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. Of course he carried handkerchiefs. Of course. "Thank you," she whispered, taking it. "You're welcome." He stepped back, giving her space. "Take your time going through everything. There's no rush, and if you need help or just want company, I can clear my schedule." "You don't have to do that." "I want to." And the really terrifying thing was that Claire believed him. She spent the entire day sorting through boxes with Margaret and Elena's help. Her mother's recipe collection, each card written in her careful handwriting. Her father's business journals, full of notes about customers and orders and community connections. Photo albums from her childhood, her parents' wedding, vacations she'd forgotten. She found her grandmother's china, her grandfather's pocket watch, her mother's jewelry box with every piece carefully wrapped and cataloged. Damien had saved all of it. That evening, instead of eating in the dining room, Claire found Damien in his office and knocked on the open door. He looked up from his work, surprise flickering across his features. "Everything all right?" "I wanted to thank you," Claire said, properly, "for saving my family's things, for the house and the bakery, for—" She gestured helplessly. "All of it." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." She stepped into the office. "I know this marriage wasn't my choice. I know you basically bought me to settle a debt, but what you've given me, my heritage, my memories, a safe place to grieve, that's more than I had any right to expect." Damien stood, moving around the desk. "You had every right to expect it. You're my wife. I'm your possession." "No." His voice went hard. "You're my wife. There's a difference. Possessions are things. You're a person I care about more than I've cared about anything in a very long time." The intensity in his eyes made Claire's breath catch. "You don't really know me. I know you better than you think, and I'm learning more every day. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. How you organize the kitchen by frequency of use instead of alphabetically. That you talk to the koi fish when you think no one's listening. How you cry at night sometimes when you think the walls are thick enough to hide it." Claire flushed. "You can hear that? My room is next to yours. The walls are thick, but not that thick." He moved closer. "I know you're grieving. I know this life isn't what you wanted. But I also know you're strong enough to survive it. Strong enough to build something new from the ashes of what you lost." "I don't feel strong." Strength isn't about not feeling afraid or sad or angry. It's about feeling all of those things and still getting up the next morning, still making croissants and talking to fish and sorting through painful memories because they're all you have left of the people you loved. His hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture now familiar from their wedding kiss. "You're the strongest person I know, Claire Cross." She should pull away, should maintain distance, should not be leaning into his touch like she was starving for human contact. But it had been so long since anyone had touched her with gentleness, since anyone had looked at her like she mattered. "I'm trying to understand you," she whispered, "trying to figure out if you're the monster everyone says you are or something else entirely." "I'm probably both," Damien said honestly. "I've done terrible things, hurt people, made choices that would horrify you if you knew the details. But I'm also a man who keeps his word, who protects what's his. And you, Claire, you're mine. Whether you accept that or not, whether you ever come to care for me or spend the rest of your life resenting me, you're mine, and I will burn down the world before I let anyone hurt you." The possessiveness should have terrified her. Maybe it did, a little. But there was also something seductive about being claimed so completely by someone who had the power to back up his promises. "What if I hurt myself?" Claire asked. "What if I make stupid choices or take risks, or then I'll be there to catch you, or to help you pick up the pieces, or to stand back and let you learn if that's what you need." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I'm not trying to control you, Claire. I'm trying to give you the freedom to be who you are without fear. In a cage made of protection. In a fortress where nothing can touch you." He dropped his hand and stepped back. I know the difference is subtle, but it matters to me. Claire stood there for a long moment, processing everything he'd said. Then, before she could overthink it, she closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him in a brief, fierce hug. Damien went rigid with surprise, then carefully, tentatively, returned the embrace. "Thank you," Claire said against his chest. "For my family's things, for everything." Then she pulled away and left the office before he could respond, her heart pounding and her mind spinning with the realization that she was starting to see Damien Cross not as the monster who'd bought her, but as the man who'd saved her. And she had no idea what to do with that knowledge. The hug changed something between them, though Claire couldn't have said exactly what. In the days that followed, she found herself seeking out Damien's company instead of avoiding it. Not constantly, not dramatically, but in small ways that felt significant. She'd bring him coffee in his office when she made a fresh pot. He'd appear in the kitchen while she was baking and taste test her experiments without being asked. They started having breakfast together instead of just dinner, trading sections of the newspaper in comfortable silence. It felt dangerously close to normal. "I want to see the bakery," Claire announced one morning over eggs and toast. Damien looked up from the financial section. "All right. When?" "Today. Now. Before I lose my nerve." He studied her for a moment, then folded the paper and set it aside. "I'll have the car brought around." 20 minutes later, they were driving through the city in one of Damien's black SUVs, with 2 additional vehicles full of security following at a discreet distance. Claire watched the familiar streets pass by, feeling like a tourist in her own life. "How bad is it?" she asked as they turned onto the block where her parents' bakery had stood for 15 years. "Structurally sound, but cosmetically rough," Damien said. "Your uncle let maintenance slide for months before taking the loan. But the bones are good." The car pulled to a stop in front of a building covered in scaffolding and construction equipment. Claire's heart clenched at the familiar storefront, or what was left of it. The windows were boarded up, the awning torn and faded, the whole place looking abandoned and sad. But there were workers inside. She could see them through gaps in the boards, moving around with purpose. "Come on," Damien said, opening her door. "I'll show you what we're doing." Inside, the bakery was gutted down to the studs. Claire stood in the middle of what used to be the main customer area and felt tears burning behind her eyes. This was where her father had chatted with neighbors every morning, where her mother had displayed her best pastries in the glass cases, where Claire herself had learned to make change and smile at cranky customers, and understand that running a small business was about community as much as profit. Now it was just exposed brick and electrical wiring and the smell of sawdust. "I know it looks bad," Damien said quietly, standing close enough that she could feel his presence, but not touching her. "But look past the mess. Look at what it could be." A man in a hard hat approached them, nodding respectfully to Damien. "Mr. Cross, we're on schedule for the electrical work. The new ovens should be delivered next week." "Good. Claire, this is Marcus Hayes, the contractor overseeing the renovation. Marcus, my wife." Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly at the introduction, but he recovered quickly and extended a hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Cross. Your husband's been very specific about maintaining the original character of the space while upgrading all the equipment." "New ovens?" Claire looked at Damien. "Professional grade. The same models used in top bakeries across the country. I had Margaret consult on the specifications." He gestured around the space. "We're keeping the original layout as much as possible, but updating everything that's worn or outdated. New plumbing, new electrical, new HVAC. The exterior will be restored to match the original design, including recreating the hand-painted sign your father commissioned." Claire walked to where the counter used to be, running her hand along the exposed brick. "You're doing all this even though I might never reopen it?" "I'm doing this because it matters to you," Damien corrected. "What you choose to do with it afterward is entirely your decision." Marcus cleared his throat. "I'll give you 2 some privacy. Holler if you need anything." He disappeared into the back area, leaving them alone in the gutted space. Claire turned in a slow circle, trying to imagine the bakery as it had been, as it could be again. "My parents started this place with almost nothing. Dad worked construction during the day and baked at night until they could afford to open full-time. Mom handled all the business side, the books and ordering and customer relations. They built something real here, something that mattered to people." "I know," Damien said. "I read the articles about them. The neighborhood association gave your father an award for community service. Your mother was on the board of 3 different charities. They weren't just running a bakery, they were creating a gathering place, a home for people who needed one. You really did your research. I told you. I wanted to understand you. That meant understanding where you came from, who shaped you. He moved to stand beside her, both of them facing the empty space. They sound like remarkable people. They were. Claire's voice caught. And Richard destroyed everything they built in less than 6 months. No. Damien's voice went hard. Richard damaged it, but he didn't destroy it. You're still here. The building's still here. The recipes are still in those boxes we unpacked. The community that loved this place is still out there. Nothing's destroyed, Claire. It's just waiting for you to decide if you want to rebuild it. She looked at him, this complicated, dangerous man who'd somehow become her strongest advocate. Why do you care so much about this? Because you care about it. He said it like it was simple, like her caring was reason enough. That's not a real answer. It's the only answer I have. Damien turned to face her fully. I spent 3 years watching you, learning you, wanting you. And the thing that struck me most wasn't just that you were kind or beautiful or genuine. It was that you had purpose. You knew what you wanted to build, who you wanted to be. You weren't drifting through life waiting for something to happen. You were making it happen. He gestured around the gutted bakery. And then your parents died and your uncle stole your purpose along with everything else. He tried to turn you into something powerless and invisible. Someone who existed only to serve his needs. I won't let that stand. Won't let him win. If you want to rebuild this place, I'll give you every resource I have. If you want to walk away and never look back, I'll support that too. But I won't let Richard Whitmore's greed and cruelty define the rest of your life. Claire felt something shift in her chest, like a wall she'd been building carefully around her heart, developing its first crack. You're a crime boss. Yes. You've probably done terrible things. Definitely. But you're standing in my parents' destroyed bakery talking about purpose and community and not letting bad people win. Apparently I contain multitudes. A laugh bubbled up before Claire could stop it, the first real laugh she'd had in months. It felt rusty and strange and absolutely necessary. Damien smiled, and it transformed his face from coldly handsome to genuinely beautiful. There it is. What? The laugh I heard 2 years ago when I took that picture. I've been waiting to hear it in person. The moment stretched between them, loaded with something Claire wasn't ready to name. She broke eye contact first, looking away toward the construction. I want to reopen it, she heard herself say. Not right away, but eventually. I want to rebuild what they created. Then we'll make it happen. I don't know anything about running a business on my own. You'll learn, and you won't be on your own. I have people who understand permits and licenses and commercial leases. I have accountants, lawyers, consultants. Whatever you need, it's yours. Why? The question burst out of her. Why are you doing all this? And don't say because I care about it. There has to be more. Damien was quiet for a long moment, his expression turning serious. Do you know what my father did for a living? The change of subject threw her. No. He ran a neighborhood grocery store. Nothing fancy, just a small place that sold basics at fair prices. He knew everyone by name, extended credit to families going through hard times, stayed open late so people working double shifts could get what they needed. Damien's voice took on a distant quality, like he was somewhere else entirely. He wasn't a perfect man, but he tried to do right by the community, tried to be someone kids could look up to. What happened to him? Men like your uncle happened. Men who borrow money they can't repay and then act surprised when there are consequences. My father stood up for a customer who'd gotten in over his head with a loan shark, paid the debt himself to get the guy clear. The loan shark didn't appreciate the interference. Claire's stomach dropped. Oh no. They burned the store down with my father inside. I was 16. My mother died 6 months later from a broken heart disguised as pneumonia. Damien's voice was flat now, emotionless in the way of someone who'd told this story too many times. I swore that day that I'd never be powerless again, that I'd become someone no one would dare touch, someone who could protect the people in places that mattered. So you became exactly what you were fighting against. No. His eyes snapped to hers, fierce and intense. I became someone who could fight them on their own terms and win. I don't prey on innocent people trying to live their lives. I don't burn down grocery stores or bakeries or destroy families for profit. But I do make sure that the men who do those things understand there are consequences. By breaking the law. By operating in the gray spaces where the law can't or won't go. You think your uncle's other creditors would have just walked away if you'd refused to marry me? You think the police would have protected you from them? Damien shook his head. I live in the real world, Claire. The one where bad things happen to good people unless someone with power decides to stop it. I decided to be that someone. Claire absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with everything she thought she knew about right and wrong. So I'm what? Your redemption project? You're the reminder that there are still things worth protecting, still people who build instead of destroy, who create beauty and community and hope. He took a step closer. When I saw you in that bakery 2 years ago, covered in flour and laughing with your mother, I didn't see a project. I saw someone who represented everything I'd lost, everything I'd been fighting to preserve, even when I'd forgotten why. You are evidence that goodness still exists in the world. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I know, and I'm sorry for that. But I won't apologize for wanting to keep you safe, for wanting to give you back what was stolen, for wanting to be someone worthy of that laugh I just heard. The intensity of his gaze was almost too much to bear. Claire looked away, back toward the construction and the workers moving through the space with purpose. I need time, she said quietly, to figure out what I think about all of this. About you. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. They stayed at the bakery for another hour while Marcus walked them through the renovation plans. Claire listened as Damien asked intelligent questions about load-bearing walls and ventilation systems and ADA compliance, clearly understanding far more about construction than she would have expected. On the drive back to the estate, she stared out the window and wondered how her life had become so strange. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a grieving teenager with no future. Now she was married to a crime lord who quoted philosophy, played piano, and apparently wanted to give her back her dreams along with her family's legacy. None of it made sense. All of it was starting to feel dangerously real. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the day in her mind. The gutted bakery, Damien's story about his father, the way he'd looked at her when she'd laughed. Around midnight, she gave up on rest and wandered downstairs in her pajamas and robe, thinking she'd make herself some warm milk in the kitchen. She was halfway down the hall when she heard it. Piano music, soft and melancholy, drifting from the music room. Claire followed the sound and found the door slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see Damien sitting at the grand piano, playing with his eyes closed. He was still dressed in the clothes he'd worn to the bakery, minus the jacket, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were more muscular than she'd realized. The music was beautiful and sad, something classical she didn't recognize but felt in her chest. She must have made a noise because Damien's eyes opened and his hand stilled on the keys. "I'm sorry," Claire said quickly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not." He shifted slightly on the bench. "Can't sleep?" "Too much on my mind." She hesitated in the doorway, unsure if she was welcome. "You play beautifully." "My mother insisted I learn, said every child should understand at least one form of artistic expression." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I hated the lessons at the time. Now they're one of the few things I have left of her." Claire moved into the room without quite deciding to, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. "What were you playing?" "Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major. It's—" He paused, searching for words. "It's what longing sounds like, if longing could be music." "That's beautiful." "That's Chopin." Damien patted the bench beside him. "Sit. I'll play something less melancholy." She should have said no. Should have maintained the distance that was the only protection she had left. But her feet carried her to the piano bench, and she sat down, close enough to feel the warmth of him. Damien's hands returned to the keys, and this time the music was lighter, almost playful. Claire watched his fingers move with practiced precision, finding it easier to study his hands than his face. "Do you play?" he asked without looking away from the piano. "No, my parents wanted me to, but I was more interested in baking than music." I could teach you, if you wanted. Why would you do that? Because you're my wife, and I'd like to share things with you that matter to me. He finished the piece and turned to look at her. Is that so hard to believe? Yes, Claire wanted to say, because you're supposed to be a monster, because I'm supposed to be your victim, because none of this is supposed to feel like it's starting to feel. Instead, she said, play something else. So he did, piece after piece, filling the quiet house with music, while Claire sat beside him and tried to understand how the man who'd essentially bought her had become the person she most wanted to talk to. I think I'm starting to understand you, she said during a pause between songs. And that terrifies me. Damien's hand stilled on the keys. Why? Because understanding you means accepting that the world isn't as simple as I thought it was. That good people can do bad things, and bad people can have good reasons. And sometimes the only difference between a hero and a villain is which side of the story you're on. And that terrifies you? It means my parents might have been wrong. About justice, about morality, about the way the world works. And if they were wrong about that, what else were they wrong about? They weren't wrong, Damien said firmly. They just had the luxury of living in the light, of building something good in a place where good things were allowed to exist. Some of us don't have that luxury. Some of us have to operate in the shadows to make sure the light doesn't go out. Claire turned to face him fully. Is that what you tell yourself? That you're protecting the light? It's what I know to be true. His hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture becoming familiar now. Your parents were right about everything that mattered. Kindness, community, building something that helps people. They just never had to defend those things against people who wanted to destroy them. I do. Every day. And you think that justifies everything you've done? I think it explains it. Justification is for people with consciences clean enough to need it. Mine stopped being clean a long time ago. They sat there in the quiet music room, the piano silent now, the air between them charged with something Claire didn't have words for. I should go to bed, she whispered, but she didn't move. You should, Damien agreed, but his hand didn't drop from her face. This is a bad idea. Probably. You're dangerous. Definitely. I still don't trust you completely. I know. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But you're starting to. And that was the terrifying truth of it. Against all logic and self-preservation, Claire was starting to trust the man who'd bought her like property. Starting to believe that his obsession with her came from something deeper than possession. Starting to wonder what it would be like to stop fighting and just let herself fall into whatever this was becoming. Damien, she breathed, and his name felt dangerous on her tongue. Claire. The way he said it made it sound like a prayer and a promise. She didn't know which one of them moved first. Maybe they both did. Meeting in the middle in a kiss that was nothing like the brief, formal press of lips at their wedding. This was heat and want, and months of tension finally finding release. His hand slid into her hair while hers clutched at his shoulders, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this, the taste of him, the strength of him, the overwhelming rightness of being held by someone who'd made her safety his mission. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. Tell me to stop, he said roughly. Tell me this is too fast and I'll walk away right now. Claire should have said it, should have rebuilt her walls and retreated to the safety of her locked bedroom. Instead, she kissed him again. The next morning, Claire woke in her own bed with sunlight streaming through the windows, and the memory of Damien's hands on her skin making her blush. They hadn't gone far, just kissing on the piano bench until she'd pulled back and said she needed to think, and he'd let her go without protest. But it had been enough to change everything. She was falling for her husband, the crime lord who'd bought her, the obsessive man who'd been watching her for years, the complicated, dangerous person who played Chopin in the middle of the night and remembered how she took her coffee. It should have felt like a betrayal of everything her parents had taught her about right and wrong. Instead, it felt like the first real choice she'd made since the wedding. Claire was in the kitchen helping Margaret prep for lunch when Elena appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. Claire, you have a visitor. A visitor? She set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. Who? Your uncle. Elena's voice was carefully neutral. He's at the front gate. The guards won't let him through without your permission. Claire's stomach dropped. Richard's here? Apparently he's been calling the house for days, but we were instructed not to put him through. Now he's shown up in person. Where's Damien? In a meeting in the city. I've already sent word, but it will take him at least 30 minutes to get back. Claire wiped her hands on a towel, her mind racing. She could refuse to see Richard, could have the guards turn him away. But part of her, the part that had spent the last 6 weeks rebuilding her strength, wanted to face him, wanted to look him in the eye and show him that he hadn't broken her. I'll see him, she said, in the front room, with the guards present. Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded. I'll have them bring him in. 5 minutes later, Claire stood in the formal sitting room she'd barely used since moving in, watching her uncle be escorted through the front door by 2 of Damien's largest security guards. Richard looked diminished somehow, smaller than she remembered. His suit was expensive but slightly rumpled, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Good, Claire thought viciously. I hope he hasn't slept well since he sold me. Claire, Richard said, trying for a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You look well. What do you want, Richard? The smile faltered. Is that any way to greet family? You stopped being family when you forged my signature on loan documents and sold me to pay your debts. Claire kept her voice level, proud that it didn't shake. So I'll ask again. What do you want? Richard's expression hardened. I want what's fair, what's owed to me. You were paid. The debt was settled. That was before I knew you'd married into serious money. He gestured around the elegant room. Look at this place, Yeech. Your husband's got resources I didn't even know about. Seems only right that families should share in that good fortune. Claire felt rage burning cold in her chest. You want money. I want what I'm entitled to. I'm your only living relative, Claire. Your guardian until you turn 21. That means I have certain rights to... You have no rights. The voice came from the doorway, cold and deadly. Claire turned to see Damien standing there, still in his business suit, flanked by 2 more guards. He must have broken every traffic law getting back here. Mr. Cross, Richard's face paled. I was just having a conversation with my niece about family obligations. The only obligation you have, Damien said, walking into the room with the controlled grace of a predator, is to get the hell off my property and never come back. Now see here. No, you see here. Damien stopped between Claire and Richard, physically blocking the older man from her. I paid your debts. All of them. I gave you significantly more than Claire was worth on any legitimate market, and I did it to spare her the pain of watching you destroyed. But apparently mercy was wasted on you. I have rights as her legal guardian. You have nothing. Damien pulled out his phone and brought up something on the screen. This is a signed affidavit from Claire terminating your guardianship and transferring all legal authority to me as her husband. It's been filed with the court and is legally binding. You have no claim on her, her inheritance, or anything else. Richard's face flushed red. You can't do that. I already did. You have 10 seconds to leave voluntarily before I have you removed. Claire. Richard tried to look around Damien. You can't let him do this. I'm family. I took you in when your parents died. You moved into my house and stole everything they built. Claire stepped out from behind Damien, needing her uncle to see her clearly. You gambled away their life's work. You sold their home. And then you sold me like I was just another asset to liquidate. You're not family, Richard. You're just a greedy, pathetic man who destroyed everything good he ever touched. Your father would be ashamed of you, Richard spat. Married to a criminal, living in luxury built on blood money, my father would be ashamed of you, Claire shot back. His own brother, who couldn't even wait until he was cold in the ground before robbing his daughter blind. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. And if you ever try to contact me again, I'll let my husband handle it his way instead of mine. Richard looked between them, seeming to finally understand that he was outmatched. You'll regret this, both of you. The only thing I regret, Damien said quietly, is not making you suffer more for what you did to her. Now get out before I change my mind about mercy. The guards moved forward, and Richard had no choice but to leave. Claire watched through the window as he was escorted to his car and driven off the property, her hands shaking with adrenaline and relief and rage. Are you all right? Damien's voice was gentle now, the coldness gone. I don't know. Claire turned to face him. I think so. I needed him to see that he didn't break me, that I'm still here, like, you're more than still here. Damien pulled her into his arms and Claire let herself lean against his solid warmth. You're stronger than he could ever imagine. Because of you. No, because of who you've always been. I just gave you a safe place to remember it. They stood there for a long moment, Claire drawing strength from his presence and trying to process what had just happened. She'd faced Richard, stood up to him, told him exactly what she thought of his betrayal, and she'd won. Thank you for the guardianship thing, she said into his chest. I didn't know you'd done that. I did it weeks ago. Wanted to make sure he couldn't use any legal claims to cause trouble. Damien's hand moved in soothing circles on her back. You're legally emancipated now, free to make your own choices. Except for the being married part. Except for that. She felt him smile against her hair. But for what it's worth, I'm glad you are. Married to me, I mean. Claire pulled back enough to look at him. Yeah? Yeah. His hand came up to cup her face in that gesture she was learning to crave. Last night wasn't just about wanting you, Claire, though I do. Want you. But it was also about recognizing that somewhere in the last 6 weeks, this stopped being a transaction and started being something real. Something real, Claire repeated. Like what? Like a partnership. Like two people who maybe didn't choose each other in the traditional way, but are choosing each other now. Choosing to build something together. I don't know how to do that. How to be a Mafia wife or whatever I am. You're not a Mafia wife. You're my wife. And you don't have to be anything other than yourself. Damien's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I don't want you involved in my business. Don't want that darkness touching you. But I do want you in my life. In my home. Building your bakery. Creating your future, being the reminder that there's still good worth fighting for. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Everything else is complicated, but what I feel for you is the simplest thing in the world. And what do you feel? Like I've been waiting my whole life for something I didn't know I needed until I saw you. Like every terrible thing I've done and every dark choice I've made was worth it, because it led me to you. Like I would burn down the entire city before I let anyone hurt you. His voice dropped lower. Like I'm falling in love with you, and I don't know how to stop even if I wanted to. The words hung in the air between them, massive and terrifying and absolutely true. Claire should have run, should have protected herself from the intensity of his devotion. Instead, she kissed him. And this time, when he lifted her into his arms and carried her upstairs, she didn't ask him to stop. The next 3 weeks felt like living in a different world. Claire moved her things from the guest suite to Damien's bedroom without anyone making a big deal about it. She just started staying, and he welcomed her with a quiet intensity that made her heart race every time he looked at her. They fell into new rhythms, mornings tangled together in sheets that smelled like him. Shared showers where he washed her hair with surprising gentleness. Breakfast where they read the paper and stole glances over coffee cups. Then he'd leave for whatever business required his attention, and she'd spend the day at the bakery overseeing renovations, or in the kitchen perfecting recipes, or simply existing in a space that finally felt safe. And every evening, he came home to her. Not to his house, or his staff, or his empire, but to her specifically. She could see it in the way his face softened when he walked through the door, and found her curled up reading, or baking, or just waiting, like she was the prize at the end of every difficult day. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like being cherished. I need to tell you something, Damien said one night as they lay in bed, Claire's head on his chest and his fingers drawing lazy patterns on her shoulder. That sounds ominous. It's just information, but it's important. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. There's a man named Adrian Vale. He's been one of my lieutenants for about 5 years. Smart, capable, ambitious. Claire felt tension creeping into his body beneath her cheek. Okay. He's been making noise lately about thinking I've gone soft. That marriage has made me weak, distracted from business. Has it? She tilted her head to look at him. Made you weak? It's made me careful in ways I wasn't before. Made me think twice about risks I might have taken without hesitation. Damien's hand stilled on her shoulder. Because now I have something to lose that actually matters. So he's right. He's wrong about what it means. Being careful isn't the same as being weak. Having something to protect makes you more dangerous, not less. His voice took on an edge. But Adrian doesn't see it that way. And he's been testing boundaries, pushing limits, trying to see if he can find a vulnerability he can exploit. Claire pushed herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light from the window. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to be careful. More careful than you've been. No more going places alone. No more assuming that being my wife makes you automatically safe everywhere. You said being yours made me untouchable. In my world, yes. Among people who understand what it means to cross me. But Adrian's smart enough to know that the best way to hurt me isn't a direct attack. It's going after the thing I value most. He cupped her face in his hands. You need to understand that you're not just my wife anymore. You're leverage. You're the weakness every enemy I've ever made will be looking for. Fear coiled in Claire's stomach. Maybe we should, I don't know, be more discreet about how we feel about each other? It's too late for that. Anyone with eyes can see how I look at you. And I'm not going to pretend I don't love you just to maintain some illusion of invulnerability. He pulled her down to kiss her softly. I'm just telling you to be smart. Stay on the estate unless you have security with you. Let the guards do their job. Trust that I've got people watching for threats. This is what you meant about living in a cage made of protection. This is what I meant about keeping you safe in a world that wants to destroy anything I care about. Damien's expression was grim. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you normal. Give you the life you deserved, where you could go wherever you wanted without armed guards. But this is the reality of being with me. Claire was quiet for a long moment, processing this new information. Then she said, I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking you to. No, I know this is scary. I know it's dangerous. But I'm not going to run away because your world is complicated and threatening. You didn't run from my grief or my anger or any of the hard parts of me. I'm not running from yours. The look he gave her was so full of raw emotion that it hurt to witness. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Claire agreed, trying to lighten the mood. But you're stuck with me anyway. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Claire let herself get lost in it. In him, in the strange, intense love that had grown between them against all odds. Later, as Damien slept beside her, Claire stared at the ceiling and wondered if she should be more afraid than she was. A man was actively plotting against her husband, seeing her as a potential target. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt a fierce determination settling into her bones. She'd survived losing her parents, being sold by her uncle, being forced into marriage with a stranger. She'd rebuilt herself from nothing into someone strong enough to stand beside Damien Cross. She wasn't going to let some ambitious lieutenant destroy what they'd built. The next morning, Claire insisted on going to check on the bakery renovations despite Damien's visible reluctance. Take Marcus with you, he said, referring to his head of security. And don't leave his sight. I'll be fine. It's broad daylight, and there will be construction workers everywhere. Claire, his voice was firm. This isn't negotiable. Either you take proper security or you don't go. She wanted to argue, to push back against the restrictions, but the worry in his eyes stopped her. Okay, Marcus can come. Thank you. He kissed her forehead. I'll try to meet you there around noon. The ride to the bakery was uneventful. Marcus sat in the front passenger seat while another guard drove, both of them alert but not obviously threatening. Claire watched familiar streets pass by and tried to remember when she'd started thinking of Damien's estate as home instead of this neighborhood where she'd grown up. The bakery was a revelation. In the weeks since she'd last visited, the renovations had progressed dramatically. The new ovens were installed, gleaming and professional. The counters were in place, the flooring laid, the walls painted a warm cream that made the whole space feel inviting. Mrs. Cross, the contractor greeted her. Perfect timing. We just finished the display cases this morning. Claire walked to the front windows where new glass cases stood exactly where the old ones had been. They were beautiful, temperature-controlled, well-lit, designed to showcase baked goods to their best advantage. They're perfect, she breathed. Your husband was very specific about the details. Said they had to match your mother's original vision, but with modern efficiency. Of course he did. Because Damien remembered everything, noticed everything, cared about every detail of the things that mattered to her. Claire spent the next hour walking through the space with the contractor, discussing final touches and timeline. They were ahead of schedule, Another month, maybe 6 weeks, and the bakery would be ready to reopen. The thought filled her with equal parts excitement and terror. Could she really do this? Run her parents' business without them? Live up to their legacy while making it her own? "You look worried," Marcus observed as they stood in what would be the kitchen prep area. "I'm terrified," Claire admitted. "What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough?" "Mr. Cross doesn't invest in failures. If he believes you can do this, you probably can." It was oddly reassuring coming from the stoic head of security. "Thanks, Marcus." "Just the truth, ma'am." They were preparing to leave when Claire noticed a car parked across the street, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows that hadn't been there when they arrived. Something about it made her uneasy. "Marcus," she said quietly, "that car, I see it." His hand moved to his jacket, where she knew he kept a weapon. "Let's get you to the vehicle. Stay close to me." They moved quickly toward their SUV, Marcus positioning himself between Claire and the suspicious sedan. She was reaching for the door handle when the sedan's door opened and a man stepped out. He was impeccably dressed in an expensive suit with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold blue eyes. Something about him reminded her of a snake, beautiful, elegant, and absolutely deadly. "Mrs. Cross," he called out, his voice smooth as silk. "I was hoping to run into you." Marcus stepped fully in front of her. "Mr. Vale, you need to step back." Adrian Vale, the ambitious Lieutenant Damien had warned her about. "I just want to talk," Adrian said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Surely a friendly conversation isn't a threat." "Mr. Cross was clear about his wife not being approached," Marcus said firmly. "Mr. Cross isn't here, is he? And I'm not approaching. I'm standing on a public street having a conversation." Adrian's gaze shifted to Claire, peering around Marcus. "I just wanted to introduce myself properly. After all, we're practically family, working for the same organization." "We're not family," Claire said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "And I don't work for any organization." "No, you just benefit from its proceeds while pretending to be above it all. Must be nice, living in luxury built on blood money while maintaining that innocent facade." Marcus took a step forward. "That's enough. Leave now, or I'll make you leave." "So aggressive. I wonder if Damien knows his security is threatening his business partners." Adrian smiled that snake smile again. "But I'll go. I just wanted Mrs. Cross to know that I'm aware of her, that we all are. The beautiful, delicate wife who's made our fearless leader suddenly so very cautious." The threat in his words was unmistakable, even wrapped in courtesy. "Get in the car, ma'am," Marcus said, his hand now visibly on his weapon. Claire climbed into the SUV, her heart hammering. Through the tinted window, she watched Adrian get back into his sedan and drive away, moving with unhurried confidence. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked as their driver pulled into traffic. "I'm fine. Just rattled." Claire pulled out her phone. "I need to call Damien." "Already done. I sent him an alert the moment Vale appeared." Damien called before they'd gone 2 blocks, his voice tight with controlled fury when Claire answered. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. He just talked to me across the street." "What did he say?" Claire repeated the conversation as accurately as she could remember, hearing Damien's breathing grow harsher with each word. "I want you back at the estate. Now. Marcus, don't stop for anything until she's inside the gates." "Yes, sir." "Claire, I'm sorry. I knew he was escalating, but I didn't think he'd be bold enough to approach you directly." "It's not your fault," she said, though her hands were shaking. "He was probably watching, waiting for an opportunity when you weren't there. Which is exactly why I didn't want you going out. Why I need you to be more careful." "I was careful. I had Marcus with me. Vale didn't touch me, didn't even get close. He just wanted to make a point. And he did. He wanted me to know that he can get to you, that he's watching." Damien's voice was cold now, dangerous in a way she rarely heard. "I'm going to handle this." "What does that mean?" "It means Adrian Vale just made the last mistake of his career." The line went dead. Claire stared at her phone, a chill running down her spine. She'd heard stories about what happened to people who threatened Damien Cross. None of those stories ended well. "He'll be fine," Marcus said, as if reading her mind. "Mr. Cross knows what he's doing." "That's what I'm afraid of." Back at the estate, Elena was waiting with tea and sympathy. Claire let herself be led to the morning room and fussed over, trying to process what had just happened. She'd been threatened. Not directly, not violently, but the message had been clear. Adrian Vale saw her as Damien's weakness, saw her as leverage to be exploited. And from the ice in Damien's voice, he was about to do something drastic in response. Claire was on her third cup of tea when she heard the front door open and rapid footsteps approaching. Then Damien was there, pulling her out of her chair and into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm okay," she said into his shoulder. "Really, I'm fine. I should have been there, should have anticipated this. You can't be everywhere all the time. I can sure as hell try when it comes to you." He pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. "This is my fault. I've been so focused on making you happy, giving you back your life, that I let my guard down regarding internal threats." "What are you going to do about Adrian?" Damien's expression went cold. "What I should have done weeks ago, when he first started questioning my authority. I'm going to remind everyone in my organization exactly why I'm in charge and what happens when you threaten what's mine." "Damien, don't ask me not to handle this, Claire. He approached you, threatened you, made it clear that he sees you as a vulnerability to exploit. I can't let that stand." "I know, She struggled to find the words. "I don't want you to do something you'll regret because you're angry about me. I won't regret protecting you, ever." He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips. "I need you to stay here, inside the estate. No trips to the bakery, no errands, nothing until this is resolved." "For how long?" "A few days at most. I'm calling a meeting of all my key people tonight. Adrian will be there, and he'll learn exactly what it costs to threaten my wife." Claire wanted to argue, to push back against being locked away like a princess in a tower. But the fear in Damien's eyes, fear for her, not of anything else, stopped her. "Okay," she agreed, "but you need to promise me something." "Anything." "Promise me you'll come back. That whatever you do tonight, you'll come home to me." Damien's expression softened. "Always. No matter what happens, I'll always come back to you." He left an hour later, dressed in a dark suit that made him look every inch the dangerous crime lord he was. Claire watched from the window as he climbed into one of the SUVs and the convoy pulled away, taking her husband into whatever darkness awaited. That night was the longest of Claire's life. She tried to distract herself with baking, creating batch after batch of complicated pastries that required all her concentration. Margaret stayed with her, understanding without being told that Claire needed company and the comfort of familiar tasks. Around midnight, Claire's phone buzzed with a text from Damien. "It's handled. Coming home soon." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by questions. What did handled mean? What had he done? Was anyone hurt? She was pacing the kitchen when she heard the front door open. Claire ran toward the sound, finding Damien in the entrance hall, looking exhausted but unharmed. His suit was still immaculate, no blood or signs of violence, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of hard things done. "What happened?" she asked, searching his face. "Adrian Vale is no longer a problem. He's been removed from my organization and from the city. If he's smart, he'll stay gone." "Removed how? Do you really want the details?" Claire thought about it, then shook her head. She'd asked him not to make her part of his darker business, and she meant it. "Is it over?" "The immediate threat is over. I also made it very clear to everyone in that room that you're off limits, that anyone who even looks at you the wrong way will answer to me personally." He pulled her close. "You're safe now. As safe as I can make you." "And you? Are you safe?" "I'm always safe. I'm too mean to kill and too valuable to most people to risk trying." He said it lightly, but Claire heard the truth underneath. Damien Cross had stayed alive and powerful in a dangerous world by being more ruthless than his enemies. She should have been disturbed by that, should have pulled away from the man who'd just eliminated a threat with cold efficiency. Instead, she pulled him toward the stairs. "Come to bed. You look exhausted." "I am. It's been a long night." Later, lying in the dark with Damien's breathing evening out into sleep beside her, Claire stared at the ceiling and tried to process her own reactions. She'd been threatened today. Her husband had responded by doing something violent enough that he wouldn't tell her the details, and she felt relieved, grateful even. When had she become someone who accepted violence as protection, who saw ruthless action as love? Maybe around the same time she'd fallen for a man who'd bought her to save her, who'd given her back her heritage and her future, who looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd never known he was asking. The world wasn't simple anymore. Good and bad weren't clear lines, but messy, overlapping circles. And Damien existed in those gray spaces, doing terrible things for reasons that somehow made sense when you understood the full picture. Claire turned to look at him, this complicated man who'd become her everything. His face was softer in sleep, younger, less burdened by the weight of the empire he controlled. She loved him, completely, irrevocably, in a way that probably made her complicit in whatever darkness he carried. But she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The next few days passed quietly. Damien stayed close to home, working from his office and joining Claire for every meal. He was more tactile than usual, touching her constantly as if reassuring himself she was still there and safe. "I'm not going to disappear," she said one morning when he pulled her into his lap for the third time during breakfast. "I know, I just need—" He buried his face in her neck. "I need to know you're safe, that Vale didn't put ideas in anyone else's head." "Did the message get through at your meeting?" "Loud and clear. I might have been slightly more emphatic than necessary." "What does that mean?" "It means anyone who was thinking about testing me in the future probably reconsidered after seeing what happened to Adrian." He pulled back to look at her. "You're safe, Claire. I promise." And she believed him. Because Damien Cross kept his promises, even when they required terrible things. A week after the confrontation, Claire woke to find Damien already gone, but a note on his pillow. "Come to the bakery at noon. Wear something you don't mind getting flour on. D." She arrived at the bakery at exactly 12 to find not just Damien, but Margaret, Elena, Marcus, and several other staff members gathered in the newly renovated space. But that wasn't the surprising part. The surprising part was the elderly woman standing at the counter, tears streaming down her weathered face as she looked around. "Mrs. Chen?" Claire stepped forward in shock. Mrs. Chen had been her mother's best friend, a regular customer who'd spent countless mornings at the bakery sharing coffee and gossip. "Claire, sweetheart." Mrs. Chen pulled her into a fierce hug. "Look at this place. It's exactly like I remember it, like Margaret and David never left." But Claire looked at Damien with questions in her eyes. He just smiled and gestured around the space. That's when she noticed the other people filtering in. Mr. Jackson, who'd bought bread every Sunday for 30 years. The Torres family, whose 3 kids had grown up on her mother's cookies. Old customers, neighbors, people who'd made the bakery part of their daily routine. "What is this?" Claire asked. "A test run," Damien said. "I thought before you officially reopen, you might want to bake for the people who knew your parents, who remember what this place meant to the neighborhood." He moved to stand beside her. "Margaret's in the kitchen ready to help. All these people are here because they loved what your parents built, and they're excited to see you carry it forward." Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You did this?" "I made some calls, but they came because they care about you in this place." He kissed her temple. "What do you say, Mrs. Cross? Ready to bake?" She was. With Margaret's help and guidance from muscle memory built over years of working beside her mother, Claire threw herself into creating the pastries and breads that had made the bakery famous. Croissants and scones and her mother's signature cinnamon rolls, the lavender panna cotta that only appeared on special occasions. The old customers watched and chatted and shared stories about her parents that made Claire laugh and cry in equal measure. They told her about the time her dad had stayed open late during a snowstorm to make sure everyone had bread, about her mom's secret tradition of giving free cookies to any kid who'd had a bad day at school. "They'd be so proud of you," Mrs. Chen said, watching Claire pipe frosting onto cupcakes with practiced precision. "Taking this on, making it yours while honoring their memory." "I hope so," Claire said softly. "I'm terrified of letting them down." "Sweetheart, you could never. You're their best creation. Everything else is just bonus." By the time the sun started to set, the bakery was full of laughter and the smell of fresh bread and pastries. People lingered over coffee, reconnecting with old neighbors, celebrating the return of a community gathering place they'd thought was lost forever. Claire stood behind the counter watching it all, feeling her mother's presence so strongly it was almost physical. This was what the bakery had always been about, not just food, but connection, community, a place where people could feel like they belonged. Damien appeared at her elbow, sliding an arm around her waist. You did good. We did good, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sure you could have. I just sped up the timeline and threw some money at the problems. You gave me back my purpose, my future, myself. Claire turned to face him fully. I know I didn't choose this marriage. Know it started as a transaction. But if I could go back to that night in the lawyer's office, knowing everything I know now, I'd sign those papers again without hesitation. Something vulnerable flickered across Damien's face. Yeah? Yeah. Because you saved me in every way a person can be saved, and I love you for it. For all of it. I love you too, he said quietly. More than I knew I was capable of loving anything. They kissed there in the bakery her parents had built, surrounded by the community they'd loved, while their friends and neighbors politely pretended not to notice. And for the first time since her parents died, Claire felt complete. Not because her grief was gone. It would never be completely gone. But because she'd found a way to honor their memory while building something new. Because she'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to her and somehow transformed it into a love that made her stronger. Because she'd found home in the most unexpected place, in the arms of a dangerous man who'd been willing to burn down the world to keep her safe. Later, after everyone had gone and the bakery was clean and quiet, Damien locked the door and pulled Claire into the kitchen. What are you doing? She asked as he lifted her onto the counter. Making a memory, he said, stepping between her legs. Our first kiss in your bakery. Our space. Where everything started for your family and where everything continues with ours. Ours, Claire repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever. He kissed her with an intensity that spoke of promises and possession and a love that had grown from the strangest circumstances into something unshakable. And Claire kissed him back with everything she had, this complicated, dangerous, wonderful man who'd given her back her life and claimed her heart in the process. The world outside was still dangerous. Adrian Vale was gone, but there would be other threats, other challenges, other prices to pay for loving a man who lived in the shadows. But here, in this moment, in the bakery her parents built and her husband restored, Claire felt nothing but peace. She was home. She was loved. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And no matter what came next, she'd face it standing beside the man who'd promised to burn down the world to keep her safe, and had proven he meant every word. The peace lasted exactly 11 days. Claire was in the bakery kitchen testing a new recipe for honey lavender scones when Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim in a way that made her stomach drop. Mrs. Cross, we need to leave. Now. What's wrong? Adrian Vale is back in the city. We've received credible intelligence that he's planning something. Mr. Cross wants you back at the estate immediately. Claire's hand stilled on the dough she'd been kneading. I thought Damien said he was gone for good. Apparently he decided to come back, and he brought friends. Marcus's hand was already on his weapon. Please, ma'am. We don't have time to debate this. The drive back to the estate felt endless despite Marcus pushing the speed limit. Claire tried calling Damien, but it went straight to voicemail, which was never a good sign. He always answered her calls unless he was in the middle of something that required his complete attention. Something dangerous. They were still 5 minutes from the estate when Claire's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Mrs. Cross. Adrian Vale's smooth voice made her blood run cold. I hope you're enjoying your little bakery project. Such a sweet hobby for a crime lord's wife. Claire's hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? I have resources you can't imagine, and right now those resources are very interested in having a conversation with you. I have nothing to say to you. That's a shame, because your husband seems to think you're worth protecting at any cost. I'm curious to see if he's right. Adrian's voice took on an edge. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell your driver to take you to the old shipyard on Pier 19. Come alone, no additional security, no calling Damien. If you do exactly as I say, this can be a simple conversation and everyone goes home safely. And if I don't, then the 6 kilos of explosives I have planted throughout your precious bakery will turn your parents' legacy into rubble. I'll also make sure Damien knows it happened because you chose him over protecting what they built. Claire felt ice flooding her veins. You're bluffing. Am I? Check the security camera feed for the bakery's back entrance. I'll wait. With shaking hands, Claire pulled up the bakery's security app on her phone. The feed loaded, showing the back door, and there, clear as day, was a device with wires and what looked like a timer counting down. 3 hours and 17 minutes. You see it now? Adrian's voice was smug. That's real, Mrs. Cross. Very real. And it's one of 6 placed throughout the building. The timer's just for effect. I can trigger them remotely anytime I want. So here's the deal. You come talk to me at the shipyard, or I blow up everything your parents worked for. Your choice. Marcus, Claire said quietly, putting the phone on speaker. He's got bombs in the bakery. Marcus's expression went from grim to furious. Mr. Vale, this is Marcus Hayes, head of security for Mr. Cross. What you're describing is an act of war. It's leverage, Adrian corrected, which is how this business works, as you well know. Mrs. Cross comes to have a conversation, or I destroy something she loves. Simple transaction. If you hurt her, then Damien Cross will tear the city apart looking for me. I'm aware, which is why I'm not going to hurt her. I just want to talk, woman to man, about the unfortunate position she's put herself in by marrying someone like Damien. Adrian's voice hardened. You have 2 hours to get to the shipyard. Come alone, or boom goes the bakery. And before you think about trying to disarm the devices, know that they're motion sensitive. Touch them wrong, and they go off immediately. The line went dead. Claire and Marcus stared at each other in horror. We need to call Mr. Cross, Marcus said immediately, pulling out his phone. No, Claire grabbed his wrist. If we call Damien, he'll come charging in and Adrian might blow up the bakery out of spite. And if we try to disarm the bombs ourselves, they'll explode. The only option is for me to go. That's exactly what Vale wants. You walk into that trap, and there's no guarantee he keeps his word about the bakery or your safety. There's also no guarantee Damien can stop him before he destroys everything my parents built. Claire felt a strange calm settling over her. This is my choice to make, Marcus. My risk to take. Mr. Cross will have my head if I let you do this. Then it's a good thing I'm not asking permission. She met his eyes steadily. Take me to the shipyard, but call Damien on the way and tell him what's happening. Give him time to get there, but not enough time to try to stop me from going in. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Claire's expression must have convinced him. You're sure about this? I'm sure that I'm not letting Adrian Vale destroy the last piece of my parents I have left. I'm sure that if there's even a chance I can talk him down or buy time for Damien to handle this, I have to take it. She took a deep breath. And I'm sure that I'm not the powerless girl Richard sold anymore. I'm Damien Cross's wife. That means something. I need to act like it. The drive to Pier 19 took 35 minutes. Marcus spent the first 10 trying to convince Claire to reconsider. Then the next 25 on the phone with Damien explaining the situation in terse, professional language that barely concealed the panic underneath. Claire could hear Damien's voice through the phone, sharp and commanding, issuing orders to what sounded like an army. He was mobilizing everything he had. Put her on, Damien's voice cut through the tactical discussion. Marcus handed Claire the phone. I'm going to kill him, Damien said without preamble. But first, I'm going to make him wish he'd never heard your name. I know. Claire was surprised by how steady her voice was. But right now, he's got explosives in my parents' bakery and a timer counting down. I have to do this. You don't. I can have bomb specialists there in 20 minutes. I can have Vale's location triangulated and a team moving on him before you step foot in that shipyard. And if he detonates remotely while your people are trying to disarm, if he sees your team coming and decides to blow everything up anyway? Claire watched the city pass by through tinted windows. I have to try, Damien. I have to know I did everything I could to save it. I can't lose you. His voice broke on the words. Claire, I can't. I've spent my whole life not caring if I lived or died as long as I accomplished my goals. But you changed that. You made me want to survive, to have a future, to build something beyond just power and control. If something happens to you, then you'll burn down the world, I know. You've told me. She smiled despite the fear coursing through her. But nothing's going to happen to me because you're going to get there in time, and together we're going to end this. We're going to protect the bakery and deal with Adrian and come out the other side stronger. How are you this calm? Because I trust you. Because I know you'll do whatever it takes to keep me safe. Claire's voice softened. And because for the first time since my parents died, I'm fighting for something instead of just surviving. That feels good. Empowering, even. Damien was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm 15 minutes behind you. Marcus, you do not let her out of your sight. You stay with her no matter what Vale says. Yes, sir. And Claire? If things go wrong, if he tries anything, you run. You don't be brave. You don't try to fight. You run and let Marcus handle it. Promise me. I promise. I love you so much that it terrifies me. I love you too. See you soon. She handed the phone back to Marcus as they pulled up to the shipyard. The area was industrial and abandoned, full of rusted shipping containers and old warehouses that looked like they hadn't been used in years. Exactly the kind of place where bad things happened. Adrian's black sedan was parked near one of the warehouses, visible and obvious. He wanted them to know exactly where to find him. Last chance to reconsider, Marcus said. Not a chance. Claire opened her door. Let's go meet with a man who's about to learn why threatening Damien Cross's wife was the worst decision of his life. They walked toward the warehouse, Marcus slightly ahead, his hand on his weapon. The door was open, revealing darkness inside. Mrs. Cross? Adrian's voice echoed from within. Please, come in, and tell your guard dog to stay outside. This is a private conversation. He stays with me, Claire called back. That's non-negotiable. Fine. But if he pulls that weapon, my associate will detonate the explosives immediately. Associate? So Adrian hadn't come alone. They entered the warehouse to find Adrian standing in the center of the space, illuminated by harsh overhead lights. He looked different than when Claire had seen him that day outside the bakery. Harder, more desperate, like a man who'd bet everything on one final play. And standing behind him, partially hidden in shadow, was another figure. Claire couldn't make out details, but she could see the phone in the person's hand. The detonator. There she is, Adrian said with that snake smile. The woman who made Damien Cross weak. If you think loving someone makes you weak, you've already lost, Claire said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Oh, I don't think love makes everyone weak. Just men like Damien who aren't used to having vulnerabilities. Men who built their empires on not caring about anyone or anything enough to be leveraged. Adrian circled her slowly, like a predator assessing prey. Do you know what he did to me? For the crime of speaking to you on a public street? Removed you from his organization and the city. He destroyed my reputation, made it impossible for me to work anywhere in this region, forced me to crawl to people I despise just to survive. Adrian's voice rose with each word. All because I dared to acknowledge that his precious wife existed. You threatened me. There's a difference. I stated facts. That you're a liability. That everyone in his organization could see it. That the great Damien Cross had finally found something he valued more than power. Adrian stopped in front of her. And I was right. He's mobilizing his entire force to save you right now, isn't he? Leaving his actual business vulnerable because his wife walked into an obvious trap. It's not a trap if I came willingly knowing what I'd find. Then you're stupider than I thought. Or smarter than you give me credit for. Claire lifted her chin. What do you want, Adrian? Really want? Because if it's just to hurt Damien through me, you've miscalculated. If something happens to me, he won't just destroy you. He'll erase every trace that you ever existed. Your family, your associates, anyone who ever helped you. You think you've seen him ruthless? You haven't seen anything yet. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Fear, maybe, or recognition that she might be right. I want what's fair, Claes, he said. I want compensation for what he took from me. A way out of the city with enough resources to start over somewhere else. And I want him to understand that he can't just discard people who've served him loyally and expect no consequences. So this is about money and pride. This is about respect. About not being thrown away like garbage because I dared to question whether love had made him vulnerable. You didn't question, you threatened. You made it clear you saw me as a weakness to exploit. What did you think would happen? Before Adrian could answer, headlights flooded the warehouse entrance. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. Damien had arrived. Right on schedule, Adrian said, though Claire could hear the tension in his voice. Tell him to stay back, Mrs. Cross. Tell him if anyone enters this warehouse, the bakery becomes a crater. Claire turned toward the entrance as Damien stepped into the light. He looked like an avenging angel, dark suit, deadly expression, flanked by at least a dozen armed men. His eyes found Claire immediately, scanning her for injuries with visible relief when he found none. "Adrian!" Damien's voice was cold as winter. "Let her go! Now!" "Why would I do that? She's the only reason you haven't already killed me." "Wrong. She's the only reason you're still breathing, but that can change very quickly." Damien took a step forward, and Adrian's associate raised the phone with the detonator higher. "Stop. One more step and the bakery goes boom. You want to test me?" "I want you to understand something," Damien said, his voice carrying easily across the space. "You think you're clever. Think you've backed me into a corner by threatening Claire and the bakery, but you've actually just given me clarity." "About what?" "About exactly how far I'm willing to go. About what I'm willing to sacrifice." Damien's eyes never left Claire's face. "I told Claire once that I'd burn down the world to keep her safe. I meant it. But I also told her that her bakery, her heritage, her parents' legacy, all of that matters because it matters to her." "Then you're trapped, because I'll destroy it unless you give me what I want." "No," Claire said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. "He's not trapped, because I'm telling him it's okay." Everyone in the warehouse turned to look at her. "What?" Adrian's confidence faltered. Claire looked at Damien, her heart full of love and certainty. "The bakery is just a building. The recipes are in my head. The community we're building, that's in people's hearts. None of that can be destroyed with explosives." She took a step toward Damien despite Adrian's protest. "My parents built something beautiful, and I'll honor it whether that specific building stands or not. But you, us, what we have is irreplaceable. So if the choice is between protecting bricks and mortar, or protecting this, protecting us, then the choice is easy." "Claire," Damien's voice was rough with emotion. "Do what you need to do," she said firmly. "Handle Adrian your way. I'm okay with whatever happens to the bakery. It was never about the building, it was always about what it represented. And that lives on no matter what." Adrian made a noise of frustration. "You're bluffing. You care about that place." "I care about what it represents," Claire corrected. "Family, community, legacy, all things that exist independent of any physical location. You thought you'd found leverage, but all you've found is proof that I understand what actually matters." Damien moved then, faster than Claire had ever seen him move. He crossed the distance to Adrian in 3 strides, and before the other man could react, Damien had him by the throat and slammed against a shipping container. "Phone!" Damien barked. His men moved as a unit, surrounding Adrian's associate and disarming him before the man could even think about pressing the detonator button. "Here's what's going to happen," Damien said, his voice deadly calm as he held Adrian against the metal. "My bomb specialists are already at the bakery. They're going to disarm every device you planted while you tell them exactly where to find them and how they're rigged. Then you're going to disappear. Not just from this city, from this country. And if I ever hear your name again, if you ever even think about coming back, I won't just kill you. I'll make it so slow and painful that death will seem like mercy." "You're making a mistake," Adrian choked out. "I have people who'll come looking." "No, you don't. Because I already found them. Every associate, every contact, every person who helped you set this up. They're being dealt with as we speak." Damien leaned closer. "You came after my wife. You threatened something she loves. There is no punishment severe enough for that, but exile will have to suffice because she asked me not to kill you." "I didn't," Claire started. "You didn't have to say it explicitly, but you asked me to handle this my way while making it clear you value my safety over revenge. That's close enough." Damien released Adrian, letting him slide down the container. "Marcus, get him out of my sight. Put him on a plane to somewhere very far away. I don't care where as long as I never have to see his face again." Marcus moved forward with 2 other guards, hauling Adrian to his feet. "The bakery," Adrian tried one last time. "We'll be fine," Damien cut him off. "Because, unlike you, I actually planned for contingencies. I had specialists ready the moment Claire told me about the explosives. They've been working the whole time you've been running your mouth." As if on cue, Damien's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked up with something like satisfaction. "All devices disarmed. The building is secure." Adrian's face went white. "That's impossible. They were motion sensitive. They were also amateur work that my people could disarm in their sleep. Did you really think I'd let my wife's life and legacy hang on whether you were competent with explosives? Damien shook his head. Get him out of here before I change my mind about letting him live. They dragged Adrian toward the door, the man's protests fading as he was pulled away. Then it was just Claire and Damien in the vast warehouse, surrounded by his security, but feeling utterly alone. You scared me, Damien said quietly. I scared myself. Claire closed the distance between them. But I also learned something important. What's that? That I'm not who I was when you married me. I'm not some helpless girl who needs to be protected from everything. I'm someone who can make hard choices and face danger and trust that the person I love will be there when it matters. You walked into a warehouse with a man who wanted to hurt me through you. I walked into a warehouse knowing you'd come for me, knowing that together we're stronger than any threat. She cupped his face in her hands. And I was right. We handled it. Together. Damien pulled her against him, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. If something had happened to you, but it didn't, because you're brilliant and prepared and you love me enough to have specialists ready before you even knew you'd need them. I always need them when it comes to you. You're the most important thing in my world. I'll always have contingencies to keep you safe. Claire pulled back enough to look at him. The bakery. Is it really okay? It's perfect. Want to go see? 20 minutes later, they stood in the bakery surrounded by Damien's bomb specialists who were packing up their equipment. The devices were disarmed and being taken away as evidence. That was too close, Claire said, looking around the space that had almost been destroyed. But it survived. Just like you said, the building might be just bricks and mortar, but what it represents is stronger than that. Damien wrapped an arm around her waist. I'm proud of you, for being brave enough to walk into that warehouse, for understanding what really matters. I learned from the best. She leaned into him. What happens now? With Adrian? He's on a plane to somewhere without extradition treaties. He'll start over with nothing, which is more mercy than he deserved. Damien's voice hardened. And I've made it very clear throughout my organization what happens to anyone who threatens you. There won't be a repeat of this. Good, because I don't think my heart could take another dramatic kidnapping attempt. That wasn't a kidnapping. That was you walking into danger to protect something you love. Semantics. They stood in comfortable silence, surrounded by the tools and spaces that would soon bring her parents' dream back to life. Claire felt their presence strongly, not as ghosts or memories, but as foundations. They'd built something good, something that mattered, something worth protecting. And now she was carrying it forward, changed but unbroken. I want to do something, Claire said suddenly. What? I want to face Richard, one more time. I want him to see what I've become and know that he failed to break me. Damien studied her face. Are you sure? I'm sure. He sold me thinking I'd disappear into your world and he'd never have to face the consequences. I want him to understand exactly what those consequences are. Then we'll arrange it, but on our terms, in our space, with full security. Of course. Claire turned in his arms. I'm not stupid. I learned my lesson about walking into dangerous situations without backup. Did you? Because a few hours ago, she kissed him to shut him up, and he let her, and somehow they ended up in the bakery kitchen with flour in their hair and laughter on their lips, baking away the terror of the day until it felt like just another story they'd survived together. 2 days later, Richard Whitmore sat in Damien's study looking smaller and more pathetic than Claire had ever seen him. He'd been brought to the estate under the impression he was being summoned for a business opportunity. Instead, he found his niece and the man he'd sold her to waiting with expressions that promised nothing good. Claire, Richard tried for a smile. I'm glad to see you're well. I've been worried. Stop. Claire held up a hand. You don't get to pretend you care. You don't get to act like family. You sold me to pay your gambling debts and then came back demanding more money because you thought I'd married into wealth you could exploit. Richard's face flushed. That's not... I was just... Save it. She stood, moving to stand directly in front of him. I asked you here because I wanted you to see something. I wanted you to see that the powerless girl you sold 6 months ago doesn't exist anymore. I'm not invisible. I'm not someone you can use and discard. I'm Damien Cross's wife, and that means I'm untouchable. You think marrying a criminal makes you better than me? No, I think choosing to build something good from the wreckage you created makes me better than you. I think standing beside someone who values me instead of seeing me as currency makes me better than you. I think being brave enough to face danger to protect what I love makes me better than you. Claire's voice was steady and strong. You tried to break me. Instead, you freed me from any obligation to care what you think or feel. Your father would be ashamed. My father would be proud that I survived, that I'm rebuilding his bakery and honoring his legacy and creating something good from the ashes you left behind. And he'd be disgusted that his own brother could be so cruel and selfish. Richard stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do. Damien's voice cut through the room like a knife. Because there are consequences for your actions, Richard. Consequences you've been avoiding while hiding behind the idea that family means something. What consequences? You paid my debts. You got what you wanted. I got Claire, which was worth infinitely more than what I paid. But you also created trauma and damage that I'm still helping her heal from. You destroyed her sense of security and trust. You tried to erase her heritage and future. Damien stood, moving to stand beside Claire. So here are your consequences. Every property you own is being seized for back taxes you somehow forgot to pay. Every line of credit is being called in. Every business connection you thought you had is discovering they want nothing to do with you. By this time tomorrow, you'll have nothing. Richard's face went white. You can't do that. I already did. The paperwork is being filed as we speak. You'll be exactly what you tried to make Claire, powerless and without options. Damien's smile was cold. The only difference is that, unlike you, I'm not without mercy. You'll have enough money to start over somewhere far from here. Enough for a modest apartment and basic expenses while you figure out how to rebuild your life from nothing. The same situation you put Claire in, just with slightly more resources because she asked me to be generous. I did? Claire looked at Damien in surprise. You said you didn't want to become like the people who hurt us. That revenge was just another form of being broken. I took that to mean you wanted him punished, but not destroyed. Claire looked at her uncle. This man who'd used her and betrayed her and tried to erase everything good her parents had built. She should hate him, should want him to suffer the way she'd suffered. Instead, she just felt tired. He's right, she said finally. I don't want you destroyed. I just want you gone. Away from me, away from my life, away from anything that matters to me. Take the money Damien's giving you and build something better than you were. Or don't. I don't care anymore. You don't get space in my head or my heart. Richard looked between them, seeming to finally understand that he'd lost completely. You're really okay with this? With what he is? I'm more than okay with who he is. I love who he is. He's the man who gave me back my future when you tried to steal it, who protected me when you sold me, who valued me when you saw me as disposable. Claire took Damien's hand. And yes, he's complicated and dangerous and operates in moral gray areas. But he's also loyal and protective and willing to burn down the world for the people he loves, which is more than I can say for my own blood. Your father isn't here to defend himself because you were too much of a coward to attend his funeral without an agenda. Now get out of my house and my life. I'm done with you. Marcus appeared in the doorway as if summoned. Sir, the car is ready. Good. Mr. Whitmore is leaving now. Make sure he understands the conditions of his departure. And Marcus, if he ever tries to contact Claire or returns to the city, you have permission to handle it however you see fit. With pleasure, sir. They watched Richard being escorted out. His shoulders slumped in defeat. When the door closed behind him, Claire let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. How do you feel? Damien asked. Free. Finally, completely free. She turned to face him. Thank you for that, for letting me face him on my terms. You don't need to thank me. You're my wife. Supporting you, protecting you, giving you what you need. That's not a favor. That's what love looks like. Is it always going to be like this? Facing threats and handling enemies and dealing with people who want to hurt us? Probably. My world is complicated and there will always be people who see vulnerability as opportunity. Damien pulled her close. But we'll face it together, and we'll win, because you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for, and I'm too stubborn to lose. The bakery reopened 6 weeks later on a perfect Saturday morning in late spring. The line stretched around the block before they even unlocked the doors, full of old customers and new ones, people who remembered Margaret and David Whitmore, and people who just heard about the reopening. Claire stood behind the counter in her mother's apron, which she'd found in one of the boxes Damien had saved. Margaret worked beside her, and they'd hired 2 assistants to help with the overflow. The display cases were full of pastries and breads that looked like they'd always been there, recipes passed down and honored. Damien arrived around noon, accompanied by Marcus, and looking slightly out of place in the neighborhood bakery in his expensive suit, but he smiled when he saw Claire, and the love in his expression was so obvious that several customers made approving noises. "How's it going?" he asked, accepting the coffee she poured him. "We've been slammed since we opened. Sold out of cinnamon rolls in the first hour." Mrs. Chen cried when she tasted the lavender panna cotta. Claire looked around the full bakery with wonder. "It's exactly what I hoped it would be. It's what your parents built, what you're carrying forward." Damien took her hand, ignoring the interested looks from customers. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. This wouldn't exist without you. It would have eventually. You would have found a way. I just made it happen faster." They stood together in the bakery, surrounded by the noise and warmth of community, and Claire felt her parents' presence like a blessing. They would have loved this, seeing their dream alive again, seeing their daughter strong and happy, seeing the neighborhood gathering place they'd created thriving once more. "I have something for you," Damien said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "What is it?" "Open it and see." Inside was a key on a simple chain. Claire looked at it in confusion. "It's the key to the house," Damien explained. "Your parents' house. The renovations are finished. I had it restored exactly as it was, down to the paint colors your mother chose and the garden layout your father designed. It's yours. You can live there, sell it, rent it out, whatever you want." Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You restored it exactly?" "Down to the squeaky 3rd step and the window that stuck in the upstairs bathroom. Everything your parents built. Everything that made it home. It's all there waiting for you. But I'm living with you at the estate, which I hope continues. But I want you to have the option. To know that your history, your heritage, your memories, they're all preserved and protected. You're not trapped with me because you have nowhere else to go. You're with me because you choose to be." Claire threw her arms around him, not caring that they were in the middle of the bakery with dozens of customers watching. "I love you so much. I love you too, more than I knew it was possible to love anything." They kissed there in the bakery, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of community, while their customers applauded and Mrs. Chen declared it the most romantic thing she'd ever seen. 6 months later, on a crisp October afternoon, Claire stood in the renovated house where she'd grown up and looked at the walls that had held so many memories. Damien had kept his word. It was exactly as she remembered. The same paint colors, the same furniture carefully preserved and restored, even her mother's plants thriving on the windowsills. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Home was the estate with Damien. Home was waking up tangled in his arms and arguing over the newspaper at breakfast and falling asleep to the sound of him playing piano. Home was the life they'd built together, complicated and dangerous and absolutely real. This house was memory, important, cherished, but ultimately just one chapter in a story that was still being written. "What are you thinking?" Damien asked, coming up behind her to wrap his arms around her waist. "That I want to do something good with this place. Something that would make my parents proud." "Such as?" "A community center. A place where kids from the neighborhood can learn to bake, where families struggling financially can take cooking classes, where the recipes and skills my parents valued can be passed on to the next generation." Claire turned in his arms. "We could use the bakery's profits to fund it. Create something that helps people the way my parents always wanted to help people." "That's perfect, and completely in character for you. Taking something painful and transforming it into something that serves others. I learned from you. You took all your pain about losing your father and built an empire dedicated to protecting people from the kind of predators that destroyed him. I also built an empire on morally questionable activities, which you're slowly legitimizing," Claire pointed out. She'd learned more about Damien's business in the last few months, how he was gradually shifting from purely criminal enterprises to legitimate businesses that provided the same protection and resources without quite so many legal gray areas. It was a slow process, but it was happening. Because you make me want to be better, to build something that won't shame you. Nothing you do could shame me. I know who you are, all of it, and I love all of it. Claire kissed him softly. But I also love that you're choosing to evolve, to take all that power and use it for something beyond just survival and revenge. They stood in the house where Claire had grown up, planning a future that honored her past while creating something new. And later, when they drove back to the estate through the city that had tried to break them both, Claire felt nothing but gratitude. Her life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned. She'd lost her parents, been betrayed by her uncle, forced into marriage with a stranger. She'd faced danger and fear in moments where she'd thought she might not survive. But she'd also found love in the most unexpected place, found strength she didn't know she possessed, found purpose in rebuilding what had been destroyed and creating something new from the ashes. She was no longer Claire Whitmore, the invisible girl whose own family saw her as disposable. She was Claire Cross, wife to a powerful man, owner of a thriving bakery, and the woman who'd proven that being bought didn't mean being owned, that being forced into marriage didn't mean being forced to stay powerless, and that love could grow even in the darkest circumstances. A year after the wedding, Claire and Damien stood in the grand ballroom of the estate surrounded by everyone who mattered to them. Margaret and Elena, Marcus and his team, old customers from the bakery, even Mrs. Chen dressed in her finest clothes. They were hosting a charity gala to raise money for the community center, and the turnout had exceeded every expectation. The ballroom was full of people who'd come to support the cause and celebrate what Claire had built. "Look at this," Damien said, pulling her close as they watched the crowd. "Look at what you created." "We created," Claire corrected. "None of this happens without you. All I did was provide resources. You did the actual work of building something beautiful from tragedy." Claire looked around at the gathering, at the wealthy donors mingling with neighborhood families, at the teenagers who'd taken cooking classes at the bakery chatting with business executives, at the community that had formed around her parents' legacy and her continuation of it. This was what mattered. Not the money or the power or the danger that still sometimes threatened their lives. This, the connections, the community, the good they could do when they worked together. "I need to tell you something," Claire said, taking Damien's hand and leading him out onto the balcony where they could have privacy. "That sounds serious." "It is. Good serious, but serious." She took a deep breath, suddenly nervous despite having rehearsed this moment. "I'm pregnant." Damien went very still. "You're what?" "Pregnant, about 8 weeks. I found out this morning and I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you." Claire watched his face anxiously. "Are you okay? I know we haven't talked about kids, and with your business and everything being so complicated." He kissed her, cutting off her nervous rambling with a kiss so full of joy and love that it took her breath away. "We're having a baby," he said when they finally broke apart, his voice full of wonder. "We are. Are you happy about it?" Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. Damien pulled her close, one hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "We're going to be parents. Terrified parents who have no idea what they're doing. The best kind." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Thank you. For this, for everything, for choosing to build a life with me even when I gave you every reason to run. I could never run from you. You're my home, Damien Cross. You and whatever crazy life we're building together." They stood on the balcony overlooking the estate grounds, the sounds of the party drifting out to them, and Claire felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. Her parents' legacy was secure and thriving. Her husband loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away. And now, growing inside her, was the next chapter of their story. She'd been sold to settle a debt, forced into marriage with a dangerous stranger, thrust into a world of violence and moral complexity that should have broken her. Instead, she'd found her strength, found love, found a future worth fighting for. Claire Cross had been bought by the city's most feared crime lord and had somehow, against all odds, tamed him with nothing more than her genuine heart and refusal to be broken. And now they would build something together that went beyond power and protection, beyond bakeries and community centers, beyond everything they'd survived to get here. They would build a family, a legacy, a love story that proved even the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest futures. "I love you," Claire whispered against Damien's chest. "I love you too, forever and always, no matter what comes." And standing there in the moonlight with the man who'd saved her by claiming her, Claire believed him. Because Damien Cross kept his promises, even the ones that sounded impossible, especially those.